The column of soldiers walked through the mud as quietly as any group carrying so much weight could. The sun hung low in the sky, just barely visible through the constant haze of smoke and debris in the air, piercing the man-made clouds like a surgeon's knife made from light. They were tired, past the point of what anyone outside of this never-ending hell of trenches, mud, explosions, and death would understand as tired. They were weary to the core. America had only just joined this world war a few months ago, but her troops had learned hard lessons fast. Lessons about machine guns and barbed wire, about just how many men could die in rapid succession, about gas, bombs, and how humans could somehow adapt even to the worst humanity could conjure. Robert Bobby Edmonds walked at the head of the line. 2 nights ago, he had made it across the no-man's land into a German trench. Fighting hand-to-hand, he had stabbed and pummeled his way to a chamber within to find maps with clearly defined enemy troop movements and placements. This had somehow earned him a reward of marching this lean elite team to a small French town no one had ever fucking heard of before. Behind him were 25 men. All of them marched with their heads down. Soldiers learned fast to keep their heads down here. Rain could quickly turn the road into mud so thick you'd be frozen to the spot. Your friends would be unable to do anything to help you lest they get stuck too, so you'd sink until you vanished. The bodies buried beneath the ground, which would eventually dry up from mud, making your body one with the planet. Symbolic, but also terrifying. How much further? Marty asked from Bobby's left. Not much. Look, you can just make out the tops of the buildings. Marty wiped at his eyes and squinted into the distance. That's a town. Not much left of it. This close to the front, what do you think would be left? You got me. I understand nothing about this patrol. What are we doing here? Well, the other day a recon plane flew over this place, said they saw Germans in the town. Like, lots of them. At least 20, maybe as much as 50. Then our raid the other day showed the patrol never came back. But our top guys think something of value might be in here. Why they never came back, no one knows. No bombardment has happened here for weeks. Look, even the trenches here look old and unused. Half of them collapsed. But intel says the Germans want to send another patrol here. We're supposed to find out what's up. Marty sighed. So, again, I ask, why did they send us? Could be up to 50 Germans in there. Or, if not, there could be something in there which will kill us. Tell me again, why do they want us to be here? Bobby chuckled. We're supposed to watch from outside the town. Observe, see if anyone's in there. Not supposed to engage with the enemy. I don't care what the top brass say. Marty retorted. Those Germans will shoot at us as soon as they see us. You know it. Just keep your head down. Look, we're almost there. Bobby turned around and called for the column to come to a halt. He gestured to show quiet, then did hand signals mixed with whispers to indicate they were to crawl into the trees off to the right, then set up an observation post once they had maneuvered around enough to clearly see the town. They didn't actually crawl. Instead, the soldiers got down into a tight crouch and duck-walked into the trees. The trees themselves were something out of a madman's idea of what trees should look like. The fact they were still standing, given the churned-up ground and bomb holes all over the area, was amazing. There were no leaves, just barren wood. In some cases, the bark had just been stripped off completely. It was like walking into a nest of skeleton hands. Eventually, the town came into view. Marty was right. There wasn't much left of it after being the center of a bombardment or two. Perhaps there had been battles here between the French and the Germans before the US got here. Concentrating hard on what remained of the structures, Bobby could just make out what the place must have looked like before the war. Elegant shops and homes, cobblestone streets, balconies on people's houses and apartments, flower shop, bakery, church. The kind of life people dreamed about when they talked about moving to France. Bucolic was the word which came to Bobby's mind. There still remained a few houses and walls, but the streets had long ago been churned up by military machines, cars, perhaps even tanks. Most of the walls held up nothing, just shells of homes, defying the will of the bombs by some innate sense of duty as to what a wall's job was. What remained were riddled with holes, offering plenty of places where snipers might nest. There were houses with entire walls missing, what remained of them piled in mishmashed debris out in front. There was debris everywhere. Right now, there was no movement at all within the town proper. Well, at least they could see, Bobby thought to himself. They continued for another few minutes, moving deeper under cover as the sun went down. Phil had field glasses, which was rare, but apparently this mission was seen by someone as so important they had found them for the column of men to use. Phil set up a tripod and affixed the binoculars on top. He peered through them for several minutes, making minor adjustments and turning them slowly left to right. The rest of the soldiers sat there in the quiet and growing darkness, almost afraid to breathe. "Well?" Bobby asked. "I can't see a damn thing alive in there but rats," Phil replied. "I don't see any Germans, that's for sure. I don't know what's so important about this place." "Not for us to wonder," Bobby replied. He turned to face the rest of his men. They stared at him with the whites of their eyes shining through the darkness. They were coated in mud. Mud was such an ever-present thing these days, it was almost considered part of the standard uniform of a soldier. "We're gonna be here at least for the night," he told them. "Get the machine guns set up. One there and one there. We'll keep watching the town in shifts. Celino, you got the other field glasses?" "Yes, sir." "The rest of you pack it in for the night and get sleep while you can. We don't know if the Germans are in there, so stay alert. We may have to fight tomorrow." "Should we light a fire to cook?" "What do you think, Rogers?" The man shrugged. "Just wanted some hot food and not the other stuff." "Stop complaining. Now get to work. Make sure your rifles are ready to shoot. Stay low." They did get to work. These men knew what to do. Phil kept his eye to the field glasses while the others dug in, did their best to set up a makeshift camp. As the sun went down, the earth began to shake beneath them. Along the horizon, in the distance, bright flashes lit up the sky like lightning. "Late for a bombardment," Marty said, sitting down on a log next to Bobby. "Was probably supposed to happen around noon," Bobby retorted. "But the top brass had to argue about it for 6 hours. Marty laughed and took a bite out of a biscuit which looked as hard and tasty as a rock. He crunched on it for a moment, lost in his own mind. "It was good to be away from it for a while," he said. Bobby just nodded. He remembered the first time he experienced the big guns. It was hard to explain, but it was like God had 1,000 fists and was pummeling the earth in a rage as a spoiled child denied his candy mite. The entire world seemed about to crack, and its fiery guts would spill out beneath you, then flow up your legs, consuming you. Surely these guns and corresponding missiles were so massive they would cause the planet to split in two. All you could do was huddle in a trench. Nowhere was safe, not even the dugouts they made for the higher-ups to make their plans. The earth shifted, then mountains of dirt and debris flew into the air. It all came down on you like pellets from a gun. You held onto your knees and screamed into the noise, but prayed you'd live through it. You prayed you weren't buried alive in a trench in France. On and on it went until you were certain your mind would snap like a twig. You'd end up raving or catatonic, or you'd just run into the hellish sound and be blown to pieces. This was just the first in a series of nightmares you experienced here. The late-night patrols across no man's land were soon added. The run over the top and running into machine gun fire was also constant. Death was always there. Dead men lined the walls of every trench, becoming part of it. You got used to the taste of blood on your lips, your hands, your food. It was always possible it wasn't even your own blood. Marty was right. It was good to be here and away from it. Even if there were Germans in the town, dealing with a few Germans was somehow better than dealing with the entire country, the whole army, across the pitted field between their trenches and the Americans. Bobby and Marty pulled out cigarettes, lighting them carefully in the growing darkness. They both slid down into the mud a bit further. "Do you really think the Germans care about this town?" Marty asked. Bobby shrugged. "I hope not. I hope they just walked through here and we just missed it. The airplane guys don't always get the full picture. I heard some of the guys say the future war will all be fought in the air," Marty said, blowing smoke rings. "I can believe it," Bobby said. "They'll just keep making them faster and able to fly longer distances or up higher. Hell, they might actually end up in space someday." Marty laughed. "I can't even fathom such a thing. What nightmares do you think are up there?" Bobby laughed too. "God only knows. Maybe nothing. Hey, I think I saw something," Phil said. Bobby froze. He looked over at Marty. It was hard to detect his friend's face in the growing shadows, but he could tell the man's body had stiffened. "Shit," Bobby whispered. He crawled his way through the muck. He could feel the eyes of the rest of the men boring into his head. Bobby reached Phil and the binoculars. Phil's eyes were wide in the darkness. "What did you see?" Bobby asked. Phil shook his head. Bobby heard the fabric of his shirt rubbing against his neck. "I don't know," he replied. "I saw something move, and it was big, almost like a shadow across the whole set of binoculars." "A shadow? You're crazy. You blinked or something." "No," Phil replied. "It was something, moving fast." "Doesn't sound like the Germans." "I didn't say it was the goddamn Germans. I just said I saw something." Bobby didn't want to get into an argument. He rubbed his eyes and peered through the glasses. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust. Then the village came into view. It was difficult to see much, just shadows and darkness. He could make out the piles of debris and the broken buildings. There was no movement. Somewhere insects droned. Funny, Bobby thought. So much death and destruction, and yet the bugs still kept coming. When the rest of the world was dead and gone, the entire planet would just be insects. Then, something rushed across the lenses. Bobby's head snapped back. "Did you see it?" Phil asked. "I saw something." "A shadow, right?" Bobby nodded. "I saw something. I don't know what, though." "A goddamn shadow." "It moved too fast to be a soldier, though," Bobby said. He put his eyes against the binoculars again. He adjusted the viewfinder. There was nothing but shadows visible. How could he determine one shadow from another? More piles of rubble, bricks and stone. He could see right into what had once been a parlor or living room in one building. Bobby could almost imagine a family living there, eating there, perhaps, drinking coffee or tea. He waited for several minutes, staring as the darkness grew and the image of the town grew dimmer. Soon, there would be no way to make out anything within. There was no further movement. He ground his teeth and cursed under his breath. He sat back, and when he turned around, stared into the wide eyes of the entire group. All of them were breathing shallowly, if at all, looking at him eagerly. When he didn't respond right away, it was Phil who broke the silence. "Well, did you see it?" Bobby shook his head, chewing on his lower lip. "I saw something, or thought I did. Look, I stared through the fucking thing for several more minutes and nothing happened again. What did you see? Marty asked. I don't know. God damn it, I don't know what I saw. There was a sort of shadow, a quick movement across the lens, but it could have been anything. A bird, a bat, my goddamn imagination. I can't say it was anything remotely like a German. They sat in silence again. What do we do? Phil asked. I don't know, Bobby replied. The orders are to sit here and watch to see if there are German troops. We're not supposed to chase after shadows. But there was something. I don't know if there was or not. Phil, stop scaring the rest of the group. You don't know what you saw any more than I do. He sat back against a fallen tree and cursed under his breath. What was he supposed to do with this? He was sure he had seen something. Exactly what it was, he couldn't be sure. But he was absolutely certain it wasn't a German tank, a soldier, or a machine gun. Just then, a hideous howling sound filled the air. The entire group of men jumped and clutched their hands to their ears. It was so loud, it was unlike any howling Bobby had heard before, and he had owned bloodhounds and other dogs all his life. It went on, much longer than any normal howl he had heard before. What in the holy fuck? Bobby had no idea who said the question, because the insane howling just kept going. Then there was a pause, followed by another long howl. Bobby had been afraid many times during his tenure on the front. However, the dim fear of dying before charging across the space between the fronts was different. That feeling was a nervousness, which was hard to describe. His training superseded these emotions as he jumped into action. Sitting in a field outside of a dead town, hearing this horrific thing was something different. This spoke to his most primal fears, the ones going back to ancestors who lived in the woods or the wilderness. What is that? It has to be a wolf, Marty said, but his voice quavered with uncertainty. There's never been a wolf who made a noise like that. Shut up, Bobby said, and he snapped his eyes back to the field glasses. It was too dark to see much of anything now, just shadows mixed with more shadows. Then, something moved again, and this time he saw a flash of red. 2 red discs in the distance. The red dots looked a lot like eyes. There was a flash of white beneath the red, a flash of white which quite closely resembled teeth. Bobby staggered backward from the mounted field glasses. The look of terror on his face caused the men to back away, save for Marty, who came to his side immediately. Bobby, what did you see? Bobby looked his friend straight in the eyes. This place is haunted. Haunted or cursed. We need to get out of here. Marty cracked Bobby hard across the face. The sting snapped him back to reality. Pull yourself together, man, Marty hissed. The men are watching. Just then, the howl came once more. Much louder, much longer. Most disturbingly, much closer. Christ, what's going on here? A man named Plemons asked. Bobby rubbed his face and got back upright. The howl continued for another few moments. When it ended, the silence was horribly absolute. The bombardment had stopped in the distance also, but the insects had stopped making noise here too. It was strange and eerie, as if the entire world held its breath. It's a wolf, Bobby said. Or just a dog. It spooked me for a minute when I saw its eyes, but it's a dog. Probably a pet from the town which has been on its own for a while. Probably starving. I've been around a lot of dogs, even a wolf or 2 in my day, and I've never heard one like that, Dixon said, his voice quivering. God damn it, pull yourselves together. I never thought I'd see a bunch of shell-shocked cowards in U.S. uniforms like this. Our orders are to observe the town overnight and report back in the morning. We're going to do it. We'll work in shifts. 2 of them. One will man the glasses, the others will be ready with a rifle. If a hungry dog or rabid wolf comes near, shoot it. The men regarded him silently. He could see he had wounded their pride by calling them cowards. Most of them had volunteered to be here, and some had considered going to other countries in order to join in the fight against the Kaiser while America dragged its feet entering the war. The rest of you eat something and quit letting shadows turn into ghouls. I'm not your mommy, and there's not monsters under the bed. If you can manage it, get some rest. We'll be back at the front tomorrow. Use this time to rest. There are enough things to fear back at the front. The men grumbled, but they got back to their positions. There was an aura of fear, and as the darkness grew, so did the aura. Bobby sat back and sighed, removing his helmet and running his fingers through his greasy, sweaty hair. When was the last time he had washed it? His entire body felt comprised of dirt. "What did you see?" Marty asked. Phil was there too, listening eagerly, leaning in. "I don't know. A shadow? Something? I thought I saw 2 glowing red dots. They looked like eyes. Then a flash of white. It's all in my head. I'm going cuckoo here." Phil did not look assured. He gazed back at the mounted field glasses as if they were a snake about to bite him. "Phil, I need you to keep an eye out," Bobby said. "I know you're a bit shaken, but I need your eyes. I need you to take the first shift. Can you handle it?" Phil did not look like he could handle it in the least. The man was practically shaking in his place, but he nodded. "Thanks," Bobby said. "We'll make sure nothing gets in. Anything you see, though, you let me know. Just try not to shout again. Let's not let our imaginations turn everything into a ghost or goblin." Phil reluctantly moved back to the field glasses. Bobby had no idea what he was going to be able to see at this point. The sun was gone, and the night out here was absolute. Bobby was from New York, and he wasn't used to the total darkness when the sun went down you found out in this godforsaken part of the world. Nothing could prepare him for the sheer number of stars. He gazed up at them now, but they offered no solutions. The moon was out there, but apparently not visible yet. Just black in the sky merging with the blackness along the horizon. "What are we going to do?" Marty asked. "What do you mean?" "You're cracking up, and the darkness here is just going to continue to spook these guys. You mean to tell me you don't realize they'll shoot at an owl at this point?" Marty had a point, but Bobby didn't want to take their rifles away. In the darkness, attempting to walk back was suicide. They could wander into German territory if they weren't careful, or end up tangled in barbed wire or drowning in mud. "There's nothing we can do about it," Bobby said. "I hope the guys just keep their heads the best they can. We can't head back now, unless you can see in the dark." "I wish," Marty replied. Then he settled back against the log. Marty was from the South, Alabama. He was used to being out in fields in the middle of the night, looking up at the stars. This was nothing new to him. However, he wasn't a cat, and there were far more dangers in these fields than perhaps bumping into a scarecrow. "Think you'll get any sleep?" Marty asked. "I didn't think I'd get any sleep even before we started jumping at shadows and hearing howls in the night." They were quiet. There were still no more sounds of insects, no sounds of anything. Even the other men were quiet, perhaps muttering to each other. Bobby put his head back against the log. He was bone-tired. What had he seen in the glasses? Surely it had been imagination. Phil had suggested he had seen something. Bobby had that in his head when he looked. He'd seen shadows and then amplified his own fears with red eyes and white teeth. Sure, it almost made sense if you thought about it in such a way, except it was convoluted and didn't entirely hold up to scrutiny. What did such thought leave him? The reality of a shadowy monster with teeth in France during a war? Bobby had been happy to work in construction back home. In New York, things made sense to him. There was violence and there was dirt, but there wasn't gas or tanks or machine guns. There were no monsters, not like this one. When the rumors of the Kaiser had started to leak, he and his friends knew this was their chance for glory. Glory and war. They were bombing children, raping women, ransacking towns. The Germans wanted to take over the world with their mustard gas and zeppelins, while their bombs dropped on big cities and their dreadnought battleships threatened the security of the planet. The Germans themselves were little more than machines dressed as men. Bobby had several friends who went to Canada to join the army or fly planes. The U.S. dragged its feet about entering the war, and Bobby worried his country was a coward, or at least run by them. Then the Germans sent their submarines into supposedly neutral waters to blow up ships. Things changed fast afterwards. Now here he was, in France, in the war. It didn't take long for him to realize the Germans, at least the soldiers, were just people. They weren't the Kaiser. They were kids who bled and died just like the Americans. The first day the Americans had gone over the top of the trench and ran toward the German lines, the sound of the machine guns had become the entire world. The soldier in front of him had just blown apart when the bullets shredded him. Bobby ran through a mist of blood, the mud squelching beneath his boots. Here he was, seeing the world, and it turned out the rest of the world had turned to shit. Hey, Bobby. Bobby's eyes snapped open. It surprised him to see he had fallen asleep. He looked at his watch, pulling it close to his face. 3 a.m. What? Who? It was Johnson, one of the men, one of the youngest in the group. His eyes were wide and white in the darkness, fear across his face. Bobby looked to the right and saw Marty dozed fitfully next to him. Most of the men rested. What? He asked. I was at the glasses. I think I saw something. Bobby wiped at his eyes. Are you sure? The words out of his mouth were like a reflex. Just one look into the kid's eyes and he knew there was no doubt. Okay. Bobby said, his head fuzzy and cloudy. How had he fallen so soundly asleep? Any idea what you saw? Movement, the kid replied. But it's so dark, nothing was clear. It's so quiet, though. I didn't hear footsteps or anything. Bobby listened for a moment. Absolute silence. He had spent so much time at the front, huddled in a trench. Even when they were huddled against the mud walls of a trench, sounds were everywhere. Humans made so much noise even when it was supposed to be quiet. Sometimes it got so quiet you could hear someone in the German trench cough. Then there would be a gunshot at someone who peered over the edge. There was never total darkness either. Lamps burned up and down the trenches or within the bunkers. Out here, right now, there was nothing. Not an owl hooting, not the sounds of the men breathing. No movement and no light. The darkness was so profound it made Bobby wonder if they were still on planet Earth anymore. Had they been flung into space? Perhaps sucked into some other dimension of silence? Was there even a war on where they were now? Bobby shifted and waddled his way over to the field glasses. The kid did the same. Where was the soldier who was supposed to be guarding the perimeter? Who's on guard? Bobby asked. Stevens. Any idea where he is? The kid shrugged. Bobby pressed his eyes to the glasses. Just barely the hint of shadows out there visible through the lenses. How any movement could be detected, he had no clue. What he wouldn't give for the ability to send up a flare so it would bathe the entire area in light. I don't see... Just then, there was movement for certain. It was so fast, so brutal. Bobby stared at the spot where it was for what felt like minutes in utter disbelief. One moment, the kid was there, next to him, staring at the side of his head. Then there was the hint of a shadow, a rush from Bobby's left, a moving shadow. There was a soft puff of wind as if something moved past quick. In the instant this happened, there was the sensation of something hot and wet across Bobby's face. It was so fast, it took him several seconds to realize the kid's head was gone. The kid's body didn't seem to register what had happened either. It sat there, hands and legs in the same position they had been a moment earlier. The bloody stump of a neck sprayed blood into the air, then pulsed with a steady beat and stream with the diminishing heartbeats. As if someone had cut the strings, the body just slumped over to the side. Before it hit the ground, the shadow moved again, just as fast, this time from the right. Now, the entire body burst apart as if hit by an explosive device. More blood flew into Bobby's face and into his mouth. The intestines burst forth and landed in Bobby's lap. They were warm, steaming in the cool night air, wet against his legs. His paralysis broke and he screamed, a scream from deep within him, the depths of his soul. The other men were awake in an instant, and soon their own screams joined his.
Help! Help!
As the horror of what had happened in front of his face sank in, the horror of what caused it took focus. Bobby felt hot breath on his face, coming from above him. He smelled blood on the breath, the stench of old, rotten meat. Blood dripped onto his head. The animal towered over him, over everything. Bobby was sure if he dared look up, his head would just crane back and back until he fell over backwards, and still he would not see the top of this creature. He saw bristled black fur, saw massive dark paws deep in the mud, tipped in sharp, ragged claws. Bobby did not yet look up. The world fell away. As the fight-or-flight reflex kicked in and his body flooded his bloodstream with adrenaline, Bobby got to his feet and ran. There was no war. There were no Germans. He did not see the soldiers around him. There was just pure primal terror and the desire, the desperate need to flee. The creature was behind him, so he ran towards the bombed-out village, which was a mass of darkness and shadow ahead of him. Anything could be within the ground between here and there. A landmine, relatively new to this war and something only rumored to exist, might blow him to bits. He did not care. His arms out in front of him in a vain attempt to ward off either gunfire from Germans within the town or collision with something devastating, Bobby ran. His boots barely touched the mud as he moved with a speed he had never achieved before. Behind him, the screams came. There was a horrifying growling sound, and then the kind of scream a man made only when pain and horror ripped him to pieces. High-pitched, swimming with blood, and then cut off as if via a thrown switch. One by one. At first, the hurried babble of the men reached his ears in such waves they threatened to overwhelm him as they tried to figure out what was happening. Then the beast tore into them. He heard their bones snap, and the ripping, tearing sounds like wet rags as their flesh was rent asunder. Bobby stumbled when his right foot trod upon a stone awkwardly. He nearly fell. His pinwheeling arms kept him upright, and he propelled himself forward. He heard footsteps behind him. Someone dashed past him on the left. He caught no more than the basic shape of a man, and it was gone. Someone else came up fast on the right. Another came up to the right, and this time Bobby caught a face. A look of wide-eyed terror, then a haze of blood immediately after some quick shadowy movement Bobby's senses barely registered. The creature was right behind him. Still, he saw men moving all around in the darkness. He heard a gunfire and then more screaming. His face was slicked in blood and he tasted it on his lips. A steady mist hung in the air, but there were no clouds overhead. The storms from a cold front would not come for another day or so. Then, as he closed his eyes to prepare for the sharp-clawed blow which would finish him, he stumbled again and fell face first to the ground. His helmet tumbled off and rolled into darkness. Bobby put out his hands and felt hard, jagged rocks scrape his palms, then open wounds on his nose and cheek. He was within the limits of the town. The breath in his lungs felt full of glass, and he turned back to see from where he had just come. How had he covered the distance so quickly? His head buzzed. The shadows of the night behind him moved. Some of them were his men running, but mostly it was the quick, barely detectable movement of whatever creature tore them apart. He saw the red eyes again. He saw the white teeth flash. One by one, the screams began. And then there was sudden silence. More of the men reached the limits of the village. Bobby couldn't tell who was there, but he heard them fall to the ground all around him. Then he heard the frantic panting of terrified men who had just run across a field chased by a creature tearing them to pieces. Just as Bobby was about to open his mouth to ask who was with him and if everyone was all right, the howl began again. This time, however, it was louder than ever. Reflexively, Bobby put his hands to his ears. Despite this, he could still not blot out the sound. It filled his chest and was something he felt in his bones, all the way back to his spine. When the first howl stopped, a second started up again. On and on this went for what felt like an eternity. Just when Bobby was sure his head would split open from the sound, it stopped as quickly as it started. There was just the heavy, terrified breathing of the soldiers around him. "Who's here?" he asked. "Hey, anyone there?" I'm here." Marty's voice filtered through the breathing. "Jesus Christ, what was that thing?" Other voices echoed next. Bobby counted 9, maybe 10 distinct replies. Then silence. "Is that everyone?" he asked. 10? No other voices spoke. "What was that thing?" Marty repeated. "It moved so fast. Was it some kind of bear?" "No bear moves so fucking fast," said another voice Bobby could not immediately identify. "I think it was a wolf." "Wolves don't move that fucking fast either," said another man. "If it's a wolf, it's bigger than any which ever existed. I saw it rip Davis apart. It moved so fast it was a blur, and it had to be 10 feet tall." "Impossible," Bobby said. "No wolf is so big." "I'm just telling you what I saw. Red eyes, huge teeth. The fucking teeth had to be a foot long. It ripped him apart. Took off his head and then shredded the rest of him. Poor fucker never stood a chance." "What are we going to do, Bobby?" Marty asked, the terror in his voice as real and noticeable as the howling which had just ended. "Are we in the town? Are we in the fucking town which may hold fucking Germans?" Bobby looked around. So dark, but his eyes had adjusted a bit. A blown-out building to his left and a pile of rubble. To his right, another building, barely standing, the walls knocked down and scattered in the street. Bricks and stones scattered all around them. "Yes, we are," Bobby said. Now another fear crept into his gut. Fear of the enemy they had been sent across an ocean to kill. If there were Germans present, they would have heard the screams. They'd have heard the gunfire. If they were even half as good as the American soldiers, they'd be on their way here even in the darkness. "We need to get under cover," Bobby said. He indicated the house off to his right, the one which at least seemed mostly intact. "Get in there." "Jesus, what about that thing out there?" Bobby couldn't tell who had spoken. "You saw how fast it moved. We've been sitting here for a few minutes, and it hasn't come to finish us off yet. For some reason, it doesn't want to come into the town. So let's get hidden before the Germans come do its job instead." They got to their feet. One of the men moaned as he started to walk. Others cursed under their breath, but the fear was palpable. There was no further protest. There wasn't much left of the building. It appeared to have been a house at one time. A few of the interior rooms were relatively undamaged. 2 of the exterior walls were down, and a giant hole awaited them along a third wall. Not much cover, but darkness was the real shelter right now. "Get down as far as you can," Bobby said. "There's almost no protection here. Stay low, be quiet." Marty was at his side a moment later with a cigarette. Bobby inhaled deeply as they found a spot in what looked like it used to be the kitchen. It was then he noticed his hands were covered in blood. "Christ, I got that kid's blood all over me," he said. "Did you see it?" "Not much, just quick movements. Think I saw teeth, maybe those red eyes again. You?" "I sure as shit did," Marty whispered. "It had to have been 7, 8 feet tall, Bobby. All black, coarse fur, huge teeth, and yeah, red eyes." Bobby inhaled smoke and thought about this. "What the fuck is it, do you think?" Marty blew smoke. "Looked like a dog, or a wolf, but ain't no wolf ever looked like that. I think we're dealing with something out of the norm. Supernatural." Ugh, don't give me that shit. "Don't dismiss it. There's more to this world than meets the eye. Truthfully, I don't know how it exists, but it may have something to do with this town. I don't know the answers. Oh, scratch that. I know 2 things." Bobby waited, but when no answer was forthcoming, he asked, "What?" "We know what the fuck probably happened to the Germans if they came here, for one. The other? We are well and truly fucked, sir. If it's a supernatural thing, we are well and truly fucked." With this said, Marty crushed his cigarette and leaned back against the broken kitchen cabinet. He closed his eyes, and Bobby was left alone in the darkness, with his thoughts, fears, and memories. Bobby sat awake most of the rest of the night. There were no more howls. There was no sound of anything moving around outside. It was so strange and quiet compared to the noise of before, it made him wonder if all of this was just a bad dream. He was really asleep in the trench, huddled near the muddy wall and piles of sandbags. At some point he dozed off, but into fitful dreams, and the slightest breeze caused him to open his eyes. It was the fight-or-flight come-down. The adrenaline had worn off for now, and he was crashing, but he couldn't let his guard down. As the first rays of sun cascaded through the house, piercing their eyes like lasers, Bobby opened his eyes and found himself staring out of a hole in the wall into a pale white, dirty face attached to a head beneath a German helmet. The image was so surreal it took several seconds for any reaction to kick in. When it did, the adrenaline he had been missing all night flooded back. Hey, stop!" Bobby yelled, realizing as he said it something had already stopped the soldier. The soldier's clothing was also a mess. He held a rifle loosely at his side. The eyes set within the skull were wide and staring, but did not seem to comprehend what they were seeing. His coat appeared much too large for him. The German soldier just stood there, staring, not raising the rifle. "Drop the rifle!" Bobby yelled. The other soldiers stirred around them, all moving sluggishly. "Drop the rifle now!" Bobby grabbed his own gun, surprised to see he had grabbed it when he started running the night before. He raised it, pointing it right into the dirty face at the hole in the wall. The German did not seem fazed in the least. Instead, he sort of swayed in the breeze, the eyes staring at him, but not really seeing him. "Drop the rifle!" Bobby yelled again. A friend of his, during basic training and with a knowledge of German, had tried to teach him some phrases. Bobby did pretty well with it too, and the lessons continued as they left training to be shipped across the ocean. "Halt! Lass das Gewehr fallen!" Bobby yelled. The sudden shouting of his native language snapped the German soldier out of his stupor. He made a move which looked like he was raising his rifle, and Bobby pulled the trigger on his own. The shot went wide and pinged off the helmet. The German soldier staggered back, but did not go down. "Nicht schießen! Sie haben die Sahara betreten! Raus hier!" The German shouted back in a rush. It took Bobby a minute to translate. The soldier told him they, the Americans, needed to leave the village, not to shoot, something about Hades or hell. The space outside the house was suddenly alive with movement. More German soldiers appeared on the streets. Bobby heard their feet as they moved and saw them out of the corner of his eye. The rest of his team was on their feet now, shouting, telling them to put down their rifles, to surrender. Bobby stood up, trying to reach his full height to look as intimidating as possible. The German soldier he had just fired at did not raise his rifle to retaliate. He just stood there with his wide eyes and a blank stare. "Can we all just calm down for a moment?" The voice was accented, but calm. There was even a hint of humor in the tone. Bobby didn't want to move his rifle from the soldier in front of him, but he cast his eye to the side. One of the other German soldiers had stepped into the street. He'd raised his hands, a dirty white handkerchief held in the right. He was tall, lanky. His helmet fit poorly on his head, tilted to the left side almost roguishly. He wore a pencil-thin mustache across his upper lip, and there was a hint of a smile secured on his face. "Who are you?" Bobby demanded. "My name is Joseph Hanschecht. I guess you say I'm the highest-ranking soldier here. Well, on this side of the front." Bobby finally turned his head to look at this man. "How long have you been here?" Bobby asked. "No name in return. Quite rude." "Sergeant Robert Edmonds. Bobby. I guess I'm in charge of these guys. What's left of them." Joseph smiled. "Yes, we heard the commotion last night. You met the wolf then, also known as the Hound." "Sergeant, we need to shoot these guys," Clemens said from off to the right. "They're Huns. We can't trust them." "Relax, Clemens. They came upon us asleep. Don't you think if they had any intent, they would have shot us then?" Bobby lowered his rifle. He nodded to the wide-eyed pale soldier in front of him. The German nodded back, but his face remained impassive, shocked. We came here to find you," Bobby said to the German. Then he motioned to his own men. "Guys, guns down." "Is that a smart move, Bobby?" Marty whispered. "Marty, if one of them tries anything, you guys will be able to blast them all to hell a second later. Look at them. Do they look like a fighting force?" The Germans totaled 6 men. All of them looked filthy and exhausted. They had streaks of dirt across or down their faces. Their clothes were torn, almost just shredded rags. One of them was on a makeshift crutch, his right leg bent at the knee. Another had his head bandaged. When Bobby inspected them more closely, he saw all of them were injured in one way or another. They looked thin, too. If there could be a photo to represent exhaustion, this would be it. "Yes, we mean you no harm. I think when you hear our story, you realize just how grave the situation is here. We're no longer fighting a war started by our respective governments. We're fighting to stay alive." "Command told us to come here to track down a French column of soldiers," Joseph said once they had poured the coffee. It was bitter and watery, but good, and from the U.S. soldiers' bags.
Just like they sent you here to find us. One of our own planes saw them moving on this village. The place was bombed, but not quite this bad. We just trained the guns on this place and pounded it when we saw the soldiers heading here. Once things were tenderized enough, it was time to send us. There were 50 of us.
50? Bobby asked, sipping his coffee. How many French were here?
There were just guesses, of course, but they thought it about the same amount.
Not the full army? Bobby asked.
Not from what our pilot said he saw,
Joseph said.
Anyway, we came just like you did. We set up a camp outside the perimeter and started watching. The sun went down, and we had plans to enter the village in the morning, to start just before sunup.
Joseph took another sip, and his hand shook as he lifted the metal mug to his lips. Nerves shattered, Bobby thought to himself, but he remembered shaking just last night too.
We got ready in the morning. The night was fitful. We kept hearing things moving out in the darkness. We heard the howling, which came back last night, and I assumed you also heard. But this time it seemed distant. Our lookouts kept seeing things in the darkness, dashing around. To be honest, we were looking forward to coming into the village, hoping to get this mission over, even if it meant facing off against French troops.
I can understand, Bobby said. I wanted more than anything for this to be over last night. Did you see the creature? Joseph shook his head slowly.
Not overnight, no. But just as the sky was lightening along the horizon, we got ready and packed up. Then we headed out slowly across the field you just ran across last night. We got maybe halfway when the creature revealed itself. There were teeth and red eyes. It moved so fast, took us entirely by surprise. The guy to the right of me was blown to pieces. I don't know if it was the teeth or the claws, but he was just in pieces all over the field. I raised my rifle, but it was too fast. Others managed to get a few shots off and hit nothing. The creature just moved from one to the next, and we started to run.
Joseph shuddered at the thought. Bobby just let him gather his thoughts, let the man speak and remember. He cast a look over his left shoulder and saw Marty staring at the German, his eyes fixed on the man. The others sat down too, listening with rapt attention. All of them, Bobby imagined, were lost in their own memories.
I don't know how I got here, but you see how many of us made it. Once we were inside the town proper, the wolf didn't come in. We've been here since. All we could do was stand at the edge of the town, looking out over the field at all the pieces of our companions. Eventually, even those were gone.
Joseph looked even more pale when he said this. Bobby frowned. What happened to the pieces?
It came back when the sun went down, and ate some.
Jesus, Marty said. Plemons cleared his throat. So what are we doing? If it only comes out at night, we can just leave, right? I mean, shit, I don't want to fight you guys. I don't want to fight you guys in the damn trenches. Can't we all just leave? Joseph smiled a sad smile.
I'm sorry, my new friend, but no. You see, yes, it comes back to patrol the area when the sun goes down. But if you try to cross over the border of the town into the field, it's summoned. Trust us, there were actually 2 more of us when we got here. We cannot leave.
Bullshit, Plemons said. This sounds like a Hun trick.
I assure you it's not,
Joseph said.
You are welcome to try, but it has been nice knowing you for this short time, if you do.
Sergeant, if you listen to this Hun bastard, then you're a fool. This is all some goddamn trick to lure us in here. We need to go. Bobby looked at Plemons and then at Joseph. One looked resigned to his fate. The other looked scared. Do they honestly look like they're about to spring a trap, Plemons? Look at these men. They look exhausted, and there's only a few of them.
Your sergeant is correct, Plemons,
Joseph interjected.
We are all that's left. We have no plans or means for an ambush. Look at us. Most of my men can barely stand, and none of us has weapons."
The other soldiers shifted on their feet. Marty leaned close to Bobby's ear. "Are you really buying this?" Bobby sighed. "After what we saw last night, how can you not?" Marty shrugged. "I don't know what I saw last night. I just know in the cold light of day, I'm tired, more than a little scared, and really just want to get out of here."
"Excuse me, my new friends,"
Joseph said.
"I hate to interrupt, but there is more you must know."
Marty and Bobby stared at one another for a moment, then turned to look at the German. The others leaned in. The rest of the German soldiers just looked exhausted, haunted.
"We are not alone in this village,"
Joseph said, then sipped his coffee. Bobby blinked and shook his head. "What do you mean?"
"I mean what I said. We are not alone here."
"You mean the damn Hellhound, right?"
"Hellhound. That is a good name for it, but no, that is not what I mean. For days now we have heard strange noises at night. Food and other possessions belonging to my compatriots have been vanishing. Then, yesterday, Heinrich says he saw a little boy amongst the ruins."
Bobby just stared at the German for a moment, as if unable to process what he had just said. He turned his head and looked at the other soldier Joseph was pointing at, Heinrich. The other German did not appear to be understanding what they were talking about, just held the same flat stare the other did. "What did you just say?" Bobby asked, finally. "Did you say you've seen villagers here?" Joseph shrugged.
"I don't know for certain they are villagers. I just know there appears to be others here, other people. This may explain why the dog doesn't come into the village."
"I'm not following," Bobby stated. Joseph stretched and waved his arms around in a general way, as if indicating the entire village, or perhaps the entire war.
"This is a part of the world where the villagers and towns like this, or those who live here, believe in certain things. Things you Americans, I'm sure, have decided you no longer believe. Gypsies, for example, are often found wandering around here. But these people believe in magic. They believe in curses. Most importantly to our Hellhound, they believe in monsters."
He paused, looking sort of bemused.
"I guess I believe in them now, too."
Bobby couldn't help himself. He smiled and then laughed. Joseph cracked a smile, and he started to laugh too. A moment later, all the American soldiers were laughing. "So we have villagers here who summoned a demon dog to what?" Bobby asked when he had settled down. "If it was to protect him from soldiers, it isn't working. All the fucking dog did was drive more of us into the village." This caused them all to laugh again. Then they paused to drink coffee. "If you're serious, though, we should try to find him. I mean, I'm assuming you searched," Bobby said.
"Yes, of course, but the entire village seems entirely bombed out. Not a single building seems unaffected. I cannot imagine where they would be hiding."
Bobby rubbed his chin. This was something he could focus on. If there were people here, they should find them. Maybe they would have some kind of explanation for what was going on here. "Well, Joseph, my new friend, I say we combine our forces," Bobby said. "Let's find where these villagers are hiding. Maybe they have information about our toothy friend out in the field there. Maybe they know how to stop him so we can get out of here. I mean, if they want to be left alone, I'm happy to leave and tell my superiors this is a town with no value."
"I agree,"
Joseph said, and extended his mug. Bobby bumped it with his own, and then they drank. They met in what must have once been the village's main square. Bobby could almost see the grass, the flowers, perhaps the monument which stood in the center. Now it was all rubble and craters from shells which had fallen here. Where did Heinrich think he saw the boy? Bobby asked. Joseph turned to ask Heinrich a question in German.
He says he's certain he saw the boy over there. Then he dashed behind that building in a pile of bricks.
There were far too many places for someone to hide. Even more places for an ambush or a sniper. We must divide up, but just one street over. We'll go street by street and building by building. Be careful. This could all be a trap. Yeah, by them, muttered Plemons. Enough, Bobby said. We'll head down this way. You guys head one street over. Joseph nodded, then conveyed the plan to his men. A moment later, they walked over one street. A moment after that, both teams were walking down the street. Eyes sharp, ears open, Bobby commanded. If a shadow moves, call out. They moved slowly while also being on edge. The air was still, silent, and Bobby could hear the footsteps and mutterings in German from the soldiers one street over. The sun was bright today, somehow piercing through the continuous smoke from the front. They entered the first building. It was quick to search since so little of it was left. Then they went to the next and the next. The heat grew and the men began to sweat. A few of them took off their helmets. By the time they reached the end of the street, Bobby had removed his too. They moved like this throughout the morning. When the sun was high in the sky, they met back at the town square and ate more of their miserable food. The Germans looked completely wiped out. How are you guys holding up? Bobby asked.
We are exhausted,
Joseph said.
The hound killed the man who carried much of our food when we ran across the field. We all had some, of course, but not enough. We've been rationing very carefully, but it's not enough. You will quickly notice there is no wildlife in here, not even rats. I cannot even find bugs. You will need to watch your stores, too.
I'm hoping we can find our way out of here, Bobby said. Maybe if there are people here, they know how to get past the dog. If there are people here, they'll have food, Marty interjected. They fell silent for a moment, eating slowly. Suddenly, Bobby felt like he was eating too much and put some of it away in his knapsack. His stomach protested, but he silenced it with more coffee. Hey! The shout caused all of them to jump. Phil stood at the perimeter of their half-circle. He pointed and jumped up and down. Hey, look! Bobby grabbed his rifle and put on his helmet. The others did the same. The Germans followed suit. The group of soldiers moved toward Phil and stared down the street. At the far end, between two piles of what had once been buildings, stood a man. Blonde hair, fair skin. His clothes looked almost primitive, made from the skins of animals. He did not appear angry or afraid. In fact, he held both hands out in front of him as if to show to all he was not armed.
Good afternoon,
he said in an accent typical of the French from this part of the country.
Please, do not shoot those rifles. I mean you no harm.
Who are you? Bobby commanded more than questioned. He still held his rifle up to his shoulder. Identify yourself.
My name is Abraham,
the man replied.
If you want to be more formal, Abraham Luca, I live here.
Nobody lives here, Plemons said. The man was twitchy, sweat poured down his face. Who are you, and what are you doing here?
Well, since I'm standing here talking to you, and there's a beast out there destroying anyone who tries to get in, put the numbers together. I must live here already.
Plemons looked as if he wanted to say something back, but he just turned red and shut up. Abraham, we have quite a few questions, Bobby said. We're all a bit confused. Can you help us? The blond man shrugged.
I was sent up here to offer our counsel. We figured you'd have those questions. We will do our best to answer them.
Bobby felt a sudden pang of fear in his gut. How many of you are there? Abraham smiled.
How many do you think once lived in this town? Now take away half thanks to bombs and soldiers like you, then you have an idea.
Bobby had no clue how many people lived in this town. No one had ever heard of this town until a few weeks ago. But it was way more than the combined group of soldiers. Of this, he was certain. "Why should we trust you?" Bobby asked.
If you don't, you will die. Either by the hound or starving to death. If you do trust us, we can tell you how you might live a long and happy life. The choice is yours.
Bobby looked around at the dirty, scared faces surrounding him. The Germans were the worst off. It seemed a good wind might knock them over. "What do you say, Joseph?" he asked.
Is there a good way to die? If it's an ambush, at least it will be over with very fast.
Bobby looked at Marty. Marty just gave his trademark shrug. He'd do whatever Bobby wanted him to do. "We'll follow you, Abraham," Bobby called out. Some of the men looked relieved. "We're trusting you." Abraham just smiled and nodded. He beckoned with one hand.
Shall we?
"This is crazy," Clemens hissed. "Probably a German trick." "Does he seem German to you?" Bobby asked. "They're so slick, who knows? Geez, Sarge, let's just walk out of here. The fucking dog ain't out there now, and we're pissing around here." "Let's see what happens," Bobby replied. "Keep your gun ready, but don't shoot unless I give the order. Clear?" Clemens nodded reluctantly. Bobby led the way, walking through the men and down the street. A moment later, the rest of them, including Clemens, followed. Overhead, the sun shone brightly. Miles away, on the front, another round of shelling started, rattling the earth and throwing up tons of dirt. No one in the village heard it. It was as if they were lost in time, or perhaps out of time, out of the war. They didn't walk far, just a little to the left, through a building, and then down a hidden trap door built into the floor. Beneath the door was a flight of stone steps. The walls of the stairs were lined with torches, a few of them burning deeper down where the darkness was thickest. Once they were down the steps, it was a long hallway carved into the rock. The shadows were intense, almost alive, as the flickering flames of the torches made the darkness grow and diminish. Bobby felt the world closing in around him, and there were times when the walls pressed against both shoulders. He could hear the men behind him breathing in the darkness. Up ahead, Abraham kept walking, never once turning back to see if the men continued to follow. He offered no comfort, nor did he offer any idea of how much further they had to go. Bobby felt his chest heaving and his heart hammered. He was going to lose it because now the ceiling was getting lower and lower. Just when he was certain he was going to lose his mind, the hallway suddenly opened up on both sides. To Bobby's surprise, there were people all around, perhaps as many as 100. The hallway ended in a large chamber carved into the rock. It went up over their heads and spread out on either side. There were alcoves chiseled away into the sides of the rock, and it appeared these were areas where people lived. Children ran around in a large empty area in the middle of all the homes. The moment Abraham and the rest of the soldiers came into view, all of these people stopped what they were doing. 2 children who had been chasing each other collided and fell in a heap.
I told you I would bring them,
Abraham said before anyone else could speak.
Are you a madman?
A woman asked just off to their right. Her eyes were wide and white in the shadows and flame.
Are you mad bringing these killers in here? These are men,
Abraham said.
Why did we summon if not to make changes? Why did we summon if not to alter the way men look at each other? Look at them. Both sides working together. There has to be an end to it all. There has to be a purpose to what we do. If we summoned it just to kill, then we're no better than they are. We're just killers too.
Bobby stepped forward. He was sweating, and his heart was still tripping around inside his chest. It was like a frightened bird in a cage, struggling against the bars to get out. Ma'am, please, I understand you're afraid, but we're afraid too. I mean, we're just soldiers. I was sent here by my country. I'd rather be home with my family. None of us want to be here. The things which brought us here are politics and governments.
And yet you have killed, haven't you?
The woman asked. She appeared unimpressed.
Regardless, since Abraham has seen fit to bring you here, then I guess we should welcome you. We do have food and water.
Bobby held up a hand. Look, I appreciate it. We all do, and we'll take you up on it, but right now, what I want is someone to answer questions. Jesus, what the hell is that thing out there which killed most of our men? Abraham nodded as if anticipating this.
I know you have questions. Your man can get food and water. You and your friends there, if he also wishes, can join me.
Joseph returned the nod. I would be delighted to join. Can I come with too? Marty asked.
Yes, any of you can.
Abraham replied.
The rest of you can go with Marta here and get some hot food.
The other men seemed dubious at first, but then more people appeared within the open area, some of them young women. This seemed to help break their concern over the situation, and soon they were being led away to an area within the tunnel where fires burned and the smell of cooking food filtered into the chamber. Bobby, Joseph, and Marty followed Abraham. They walked down another hall across from the open area. Here there were more homes and alcoves carved into the stone. Families sat in some of them, small fires burning to provide light. When was all of this built? Bobby asked.
A very long time ago,
Abraham said.
We embraced the idea men would always find new and better ways to kill each other centuries ago. When men first showed up with gunpowder, then flintlock guns, we knew. We changed our way of doing things, made preparations. We understood the technology would get more advanced, more destructive.
What do you mean you embraced things? Bobby asked.
Lucrece will be able to fill you in,
Abraham stated. They continued for another few feet. They made a right turn and came to a stop at a large chamber at the end of a short hallway. The chamber was very brightly lit, and sitting within it was an ancient man dressed in white. When they came around the corner, he looked up from a piece of paper into which he was slowly writing and stared at them. The eyes were glossed over with what appeared to be cataracts.
Hello, Abraham. You brought the soldiers with.
Despite his very obvious age, he spoke with a young man's voice. There was power here, and Bobby felt the hairs on the back of his neck and his arms raise up.
Please, gentlemen, sit down,
Lucrece said.
The fire is warm, but these damp walls seem to seep into my bones these days. I know you have questions.
Abraham stepped aside, and Bobby moved forward to sit down next to the old man. The man shifted a bit, and Bobby saw the parchment the old man had been writing on. It appeared to contain a language he had never seen before. In fact, it looked more like symbols and strange scratches which resembled no letters he had ever seen before. Joseph and Marty stepped into the chamber too and sat down. Marty held out a hand to the fire and rubbed his palms. Thank you for seeing us, sir, Bobby said. Abraham tells me you have answers for what's happening here. As you might imagine, we're quite frightened. The old man smiled, and it quite surprised Bobby to see he still had a mouthful of teeth.
You need not be afraid, sir,
Lucrece said with a laugh.
You just need to put down your arms, then kneel at the entrance to the town. Pledge that you will not fight anymore for any government forever. Then you will be able to walk out of here as if it is a fine summer's day.
Bobby was baffled, and he turned his head to look at Marty. Marty had a half smile on his face as if it amused him, as if this old man had just made a joke.
I don't understand,
Joseph said.
I don't understand any of this.
I know, you do not. You do not understand the way the world really works. None of you do. We learned it the hard way when soldiers came to this area, before it was a village, before we even had writing. When they came and took women and slaughtered men, they slaughtered children. We turned away from these new religions these men tried to force on us. We returned to the old ways. Old ways from before even your ancestors would have been able to walk upright.
Lucrece stood up then, and he was not broken nor bent. His face was wrinkled, and his body appeared thinner than a stick, but he stood upright.
I know it confuses you,
the old man continued.
I know you have questions, because the old ways have been pushed into the dark, pushed aside. But there are things out there, stronger, more powerful than humans can imagine. They were gods once, but they are not really gods. Creatures like you and me and the wolf and the scorpion. Creatures from a time before they formed this earth, before they created this universe, and before they created time and a blast of heat and light. They existed in the void, the darkness, but they always watch. They will reply when beseeched. If the men say the right words, say the right things, write the correct sigils, if these things are done, the old gods, the ancient ones, will respond. They offer protection.
He looked down at the surrounding men. Although his eyes were blocked by the cataracts, Bobby was sure he could see all of them. Not for the first time, he wondered just how old was this man.
I was there when we turned back to our old ways.
Lucrece continued, as if he could hear the question uttered in Bobby's brain.
I was a boy, but I remember when the older men told me what they wanted to do. The beast they wanted to summon.
The old man fell silent. He looked around at the men before him for a moment, as if taking them all in. Once more, Bobby got the sensation of the man seeing him without his eyes, seeing beyond the appearance of the men in front of him, far deeper. Perhaps, he thought, the price of his eyes was the cost of having the powers he so clearly demonstrated right before them all. Who or what did you summon? Bobby asked.
The creatures we summon do not have names which you humans can understand.
Lucrece responded. Then he spoke in words which sounded like a mixture of spitting and gurgling.
He is summoned when war threatens. He takes the form of a wolf or a large dog and protects those who have brought him forth.
Wait, listen,
Joseph said.
I am not here to criticize your religion or beliefs, Lucrece. However, how is this dog protecting you? We here. We got in. Wouldn't it be better and more protection if the creature did not allow soldiers inside?
Lucrece smiled.
Think about the encounters all of you had with the creature. Think about how fast it moved. It may appear to you like a dog or a wolf, but it's just the human brain which makes it appear such. Its true form is incomprehensible to the average human. Your brain simply creates something it can understand. How fast did it move?
Like light itself, Bobby muttered.
Yes,
Lucrece affirmed.
It is light, dark light. I bet you never knew such a thing existed. It has no actual form. By the time your mind puts together what it's seeing into something it can understand, it's already torn your guts out.
I see,
Joseph stated.
It was quick. It seemed in all places at once. Sometimes one man appeared to just burst apart, like when hit with a mortar shell. Then, just as his blood settled to the ground, another man would burst apart.
Yes.
Lucrece nodded.
So think. Can you, a man, outrun night?
There was silence in reply, but each man responded within their minds. Lucrece affirmed he heard them, even though none spoke.
You cannot, can you? If you cannot outrun light, how could you outrun the beast?
We couldn't, Marty replied, his voice little more than a whisper. There's no fucking way we could.
You understand?
Lucrece said. What are you saying? Bobby and Joseph asked at the same time. It chose us, Marty said. We were allowed to live, don't you see? But why us? Joseph asked. We're just trapped here, Bobby said. Can you or your people leave? Lucrece shook his head.
The creature has been summoned and will not stop killing until the war stops. It's not about whether you can leave, but the fact you are more likely to choose peace. You are most likely to work together.
But are we trapped here? Bobby asked, his concern rising. This makes no sense. How are we to stop the war if we cannot leave? And someone said if we lay down our arms, we could pass.
But what would be within your hearts?
Lucrece asked.
Would you have put down your arms and forsaken the war? What would happen to you and your men when you left here? Would you be shot? You see, you come in here, and it senses you could be men of peace. Lay down your arms, so it will want to protect you. You are now under its care.
But how can this stop the war? Joseph asked.
Given the scale of the war, the beast, really an elder god, believes humanity will destroy itself.
Lucrece replied.
When humanity is destroyed, you will be able to restore peace. If enough like you come here, then enough will be done to restore peace and sanity to the world.
This is madness, Joseph said. Yes, it is, Marty confirmed. It sounds to me like maybe you and the others summoned something which you cannot possibly control, something terrifying, hoping to find protection. Perhaps, once it was here, it wasn't exactly what you wanted it to be. Lucrece's smile did not fade.
I am not here to change your mind or convince you what we did was for noble purposes. I am also not here to convince you to stay, or that the creature will bide its time until the world is ready.
What do you and your people intend to do? Bobby asked. Wait down here until the world above is gone?
You act as if this world down here were not our native home. You act as if waiting down here is a chore. Have you any idea how old I am? How old my people are? We can wait down here for centuries. We embrace being a part of this earth and have no problem living down within it.
Bobby stood up. I don't understand what you want from us.
You can become one of us,
Lucrece replied.
All of you and your men, you can become one of us. The ritual is simple. You will learn the teachings and understand your purpose. There will be others. Others will come now, then later, then after. We will learn from them and bring them into our fold, until, eventually, it will be our time.
Lucrece bowed to them as if thanking them and sat back down. The soldiers waited another few moments, but there were no more speeches. Lucrece picked up his parchment and began to write, speaking in the strange tongue he had used when they first arrived, and in which he recited the name of the beast. Come on, Bobby said with a disgusted sigh. I don't think the man has anything else to say to us. They all walked back into the hall. Abraham had apparently decided to leave as he was not there waiting for them. They heard voices in the distance, and Clement's voice carried to them easily. The man did have a way of being obnoxious. It was his second nature. What do you think of this? Joseph asked. I think Marty has it right, Bobby said. These people turned to something dark and ancient, something they didn't fully understand. Now, something more deadly than guns is out there prowling around, and they don't know how to stop it. They moved into the town square again. The rest of the men were in various states of undress, having wounds tended to, and food was passed around. The men were content, but their faces looked haunted. Their eyes were distant, staring far off at something maybe 1,000 miles away, even though there was no distance down in these tunnels. Men, gather up, Bobby said. The men stood rather reluctantly. For the first time, Bobby noticed just how many young, attractive women seemed to be part of this group. The men were seeking comfort from these ladies. Let's find a spot where we can talk in private, Bobby said. They stepped down a hallway opposite from the one they had just left. It was darker here, more sinister. They huddled around, and after Bobby did a quick check to see if they were alone, began to tell them all they had heard from the old man. Marty and Joseph filled in a few facts here and there, with Joseph translating it to German. As they went on, the men shifted on their feet nervously, anxious. When they were done, the soldiers stood in silence, and somehow the darkness seemed closer, crowding them. This is all madness, Clemens said. This is some sick, sinister bullshit, pagan nonsense. But you saw what it was, Bobby insisted. You saw it attacking our men, saw them torn to pieces as they ran. I don't know what I saw, Clemens said defensively. I saw men being torn apart, as you say, or maybe blown apart. What if these pagan bastards lure people like us into their village to kill and steal from? They create hallucinations with a gas, or they create something which appears to frighten men like us as a giant dog. Flush them out into a field lined with mines. But we heard no explosions, Clemens, Marty said dismissively. We would have heard them go off, plus why are we the ones which got through? Then something else, Clemens said. We've heard the Germans are working on a silenced weapon. We've seen what machine guns can do to people. What if they've developed some kind of, silenced machine gun? You're grasping at straws, Bobby said. So what do we do then? Phil asked. Do we just stay here? Forever? Get old like the old man? Sorry, sir, but the last thing I want to do is stay here. Living underground? I don't know, Bobby said. Did I say I have all the ideas here? I'm open to suggestions, but Clemens, there is something out there. I don't know about ancient gods or heathen rituals, but I know what I saw with my own eyes. I saw it tower over me with teeth and red eyes. I saw it moving. I had someone's guts all over me and in my lap. Something is out there, and we have to figure out what to do. They stared at one another for a moment. Then Clemens made an odd snorting sound with his mouth and nose, turned around, and headed back towards the hallway they had come through to get here. Clemens, where do you think you're going? Bobby asked. I'm going to show you this is all bullshit, Clemens said. This is all flim-flam. I wouldn't be surprised if none of this were real. Just hallucinations they've implanted into our brains with some kind of weird gas or something. Clemens walked past the men and back up the hallway. Two other of Bobby's men stared at him for a moment, then followed Clemens back up the hall. Joseph sighed. Bobby shook his head. Your men, said a voice from the shadows, had better be stopped, because you are correct, sir. All the remaining men turned around at the sound. From within the shadows emerged a tall, thin woman with wide eyes. She had dark hair. Her eyes glowed green in the dim light from down the tunnel. Her ears were nearly pointed, and the dark hair was wound around her head in an elaborate series of braids. Who are you? Bobby asked.
How long have you been there?
Long enough to hear you and understand what you were told by the old man. My name is Prudence. I was born here, and you were correct in your assessment.
What do you mean? Bobby asked urgently.
We have to discuss this later,
Prudence said.
We must stop your men. If we do not, they will be killed. We can talk after.
Bobby's head spun with thoughts he could barely understand, but he knew she was right. Every instinct inside of him said Clemens and the other two who followed him were in danger. Without another word, he ran after the 3 soldiers.
Clemens, get back here!
He called, his voice echoing down the chamber filled with villagers.
Clemens, that's an order!
There was no response. Clemens heard footsteps behind him, but didn't pause to see who was following. He turned right and followed the narrow path they had taken to get here, nearly bashing his head into the low ceiling at one point. He could hear the men up ahead talking quickly to each other.
Clemens!
Bobby called.
Stop right this minute! That's an order!
There was no response. It seemed like an eternity before they came back out into the sunlight. Bobby was surprised to see the sun was lower in the sky than he had assumed it would be. The shadows were longer. Late in the afternoon, with plenty of sun left, but not the midday sun they had when they went underground. He saw Clemens and the other 2 just ahead.
Clemens, stop right now!
Clemens looked back at him, but waved his hand dismissively and kept walking. Bobby removed his revolver, stopped, got into his stance, aimed, and fired a shot into the ground ahead of the 3 men. All 3 froze.
I said stop!
Clemens whirled around, his face a mask of anger.
Are you mad? Have all of you gone mad?
He froze mid-sentence.
Who's this with you now?
Clemens cried, gesturing to someone behind Bobby. It was only then he realized Prudence had followed them.
Never mind,
Bobby said.
Where do you think you're going?
We've had enough of this nonsense, Clemens said, sweat beaded on his upper lip, his eyes bright and nervous in his skull.
I'm not sitting here listening to more of this pagan bull.
You saw what happened, man, Bobby implored.
I'm telling you as the senior member of the group to stand down. Get back in line with the men. We're gonna work together to find a solution.
What solution? Clemens hissed. The other 2 men with him stood behind him, looking less certain than their erstwhile leader.
The solution is staying here?
Of course not, Bobby retorted.
We're going to figure out a way to leave. We're going to figure out a way to stop the thing out there. There's nothing out there we haven't seen before,
Clemens said. Bobby realized the man had become unhinged, and he understood there would be no turning him back now.
It's all bullshit. Nonsense. You see how late it is out here? Look at the sun. How long were we in there? It felt like maybe 20 minutes. How is the sun this low in the sky? Sergeant, they're poisoning us or hypnotizing us or some other gypsy bullshit. I know you think it's just mines or machine guns, but it's not,
Bobby said.
I saw the thing, Clemens. I'm telling you, I looked it in the eyes.
Clemens' face cracked a bit, the mask of cockiness and assuredness, and he looked like he was going to scream or tear his hair out.
And you were one of the magically chosen ones, huh? You're somehow the hope of humanity? You and these fucking Huns? You want me to believe that? You made it too,
Bobby said.
Means you're chosen, just like me.
Clemens stepped back as if Bobby had struck him.
No, he said at last. Now, don't try that bullshit with me. We're going to the opposite side of the town from the one where we ran in. The 3 of us. We're gonna head out and cross the field there. We'll get to the tree line and signal back. Show you it's all nonsense.
You should listen to your commander,
Prudence intoned. He doesn't understand what's happening, but he knows you'll die.
I'm sorry, but who the hell are you, lady? Who the hell are you, and why should I listen? Clemens stared hard at the young woman, challenging her to speak up. Prudence did not appear intimidated, but she didn't say anything more. Clemens turned his ire back towards Bobby. Am I gonna get any problems from you, Sarge? You gonna shoot me? Bobby found he didn't have the strength to keep fighting this fight. He knew in the depth of his own gut he was right. Clemens and the other two would be dead soon, but what did it matter when hundreds were dying by the scores now? Mowed down in muddy fields, or blown to pieces in dirty trenches, or devoured by a pagan god resembling a wolf, what did it matter? Would trying to stop him make a difference? Shooting him sure wouldn't. Clemens was scared. He didn't want to believe, and putting a gun in his face wouldn't make him believe. Maybe the man even wanted to die. It was hard to blame him. I won't stop you. I won't shoot you either. But you're a goddamn fool, Clemens. You'll get yourself killed along with these two. But I won't stop you. Clemens seemed almost shocked by the statement, blinking at him like a lost dog for a moment. Then he realized the other two were looking at him, so he straightened up. Fine. Good. Look, when we get across the field, you'll see. You'll follow. We'll report back, there's nothing here. Do what we can to leave these people alone. A shadow of fear crossed his face. I want nothing more to do with this place. With his words finished, he saluted, then turned on his heel and walked down the street. His two acolytes followed. Bobby sighed and ran his hands through his sweaty hair. Christ, he muttered. What's gonna happen to them?
They will be killed,
Prudence said, coming towards Bobby with her strange, wide eyes.
They will be destroyed by the beast.
Jesus, what are we going to do, Bobby? Marty asked, his face bright and alert. I guess we'd go watch and see what happens. Bobby sighed with a voice full of exhaustion and resignation. What else can we do? He's right. What good would it do to shoot him? They'd be dead regardless. Bobby shrugged and put his head down, not wanting to look at the rest of the men or the shocked, saddened look in Marty's face. He followed Clemens and the other two soldiers, keeping his distance, but always keeping them in sight. It wasn't long before they were at the far edge of the town, a side opposite from the one they had entered. Why this way? Bobby asked when they arrived. If we came in the other side, we already know where people were attacked, right? Clemens' eyes were vibrating in his skull. The more likely route for someone to come in here is the side we came in on. They couldn't have mined the entire area around the town. They can't. It made no sense to Bobby, but he could tell Clemens had been pushed too far, seen too much. The man had been over the top in the trenches at least 24 times before he was chosen for this insane mission. How many men had he seen blown apart in front of him? Countless dozens. This situation had finally pushed the insanity button within his mind, and he was gone. Nothing he did made much sense except to him, but he was somehow charismatic enough to attract two more. Bobby nodded as if what he had said made sense. This seemed to confirm to Clemens to continue. He turned and spoke quietly to the two men with him. Bobby turned his head away, unsure if he could keep watching this. He saw the rest of the men, American and German, had filled in behind him to watch. They all looked terrified and saddened. How many horrors had they all seen in this war, and yet this one, seeing 3 men going to their death, had struck them to the core. Clemens and the men secured what gear they had. They no longer held guns, which Bobby found intriguing. With one more look over his shoulder, Clemens looked as if he might want to say something else, then thought better of it. The 3 of them stepped in a line and walked past the edge of the town, past the rubble of the stone wall around this town. Bobby edged closer now. His heart pounded in his chest, and he thought it might just burst through onto the dirty ground. The rest of the men followed suit. The 3 soldiers were soon 2 feet, then 5 feet, then 10 feet out into the field. There was no sound. No sounds of shelling or distant gunfire from the front. No birds. Bobby thought immediately of the quiet the night they had arrived. The 3 soldiers appeared as surprised as everyone else. Plemons turned his head around to gaze back the way he had come. A hint of a smile crossed his face. 15 feet. 20 feet. They were getting more casual, maybe a little cocky now. The 3 soldiers started to move a little faster. One of them whispered something, and the other 2 laughed.
Is it getting darker?
It's coming. Bobby looked around, and it was definitely less bright. As if the shadows from miles around had congregated here and were now also trying to leave the village. The sky grew more dim, and the shadows around them began to move. 35 feet. 37. The shadows coalesced into one large shadow which slid across the broken ground toward the 3 soldiers.
Run!
Bobby hadn't even realized he was the one who shouted until Marty looked back at him in surprise. The large shadow passed over the 3 soldiers. They stopped cold, their hands away from their sides. All 3 looked around as they were suddenly enveloped in darkness. Then the darkness pooled about 5 to 10 feet in front of them. The shadows contracted, grew tighter, then expanded upward. As the shadow grew from the ground, it became solid. Moments later, features appeared. Fur, paws, claws.
Oh my sweet Jesus Christ,
Marty whispered. Joseph muttered something in German. The first thing Bobby noticed within the shadow were the red eyes, bright, piercing through the sudden darkness. Then the mouth opened, and what appeared to be row upon row of teeth were visible. The rest of the shape formed, ears and snout and paws. A massive black dog at least 10 feet high stood there, growling at the 3 men.
oh my God.
Plemons and the other 2 soldiers did their best. They tried to run around the huge beast, dodging to the right, but there was never any doubt. The beast moved as if made of light. One moment it was there, fully formed and solid, then it was smoke, then it was all around the men. The soldier on the far right stopped running so quickly, it took Bobby a moment to realize the man's head had been taken off cleanly at the neck. Blood spouted from the savaged and severed blood vessels. Just as the body started to fall, the shadow moved again, followed by a sickening crunch, and the top half of the man's body was bitten in half.
Jesus,
Bobby whispered in a kind of silent prayer he was certain would not be heard. He wanted to tear his gaze away, but found himself unable to move, unable to do anything but watch. The intestines from the man bitten in half erupted from the bottom half of his body like tentacles. Then the shadow moved again, and even the bottom half was gone. All of this happened in mere fractions of a second, too fast for the eye to follow. By the time the horror of the image registered, the shadow would cross again, and something new would take its place.
Plemons, run, goddammit!
Marty cried. Get back here! Plemons appeared frozen, his mouth agape, staring at the spot where his fellow soldier had been until seconds ago. Now there were just particles of unidentifiable meat and blood where a man once stood. He made odd sounds from his throat, his eyes so wide his eyeballs looked like they might just fall out of his skull and roll in the dirt. The soldier next to Plemons suffered no such paralysis. Having seen enough, he cried out and did an about-face attempt to run back the way he had come. The wolf creature didn't give him the chance to take more than 2 steps before the shadow crossed in front of him. The soldier's head was gone in a flash, so fast his body took 3 more steps before falling over on its side. A moment later, the remains were gone too, leaving behind bloodstains and little else. This was enough for Plemons. He tried to run too, the desire to flee overwhelming. His eyes were so wide, filled with pure animal terror. Bobby felt an icy hand clutch at his heart, realizing he was watching a doomed man. The shadow appeared directly in front of Plemons in an instant, the dog stretching to its full height. Bobby and the men in the village could no longer see anything more than Plemons' feet through the legs of the towering beast. They could hear the man scream, however. The scream did not last long, just a few seconds, then the hideous sound of bones crunching and a weird, wet sound of flesh rending. The creature let Plemons' body fall to the ground as it turned to face the men at the edge of the village. The upper half of their compatriot's body hung, bleeding and dripping from its mouth. Its teeth bared and a growl which shook the ground emanated from the beast. Its skin, such as it was, rippled and changed, and within it, Bobby would swear he could see faces. The faces of other men it had devoured. He didn't know and did not want to know, but he could see them nonetheless, roiling and turning within what would have been a normal dog's fur. Faces filled with terror and horror beyond imagination. The red eyes pierced their own, nailing them to the spot, but also marking them. It knew them and what their purpose was. They were to stay here, away from man's war. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the beast vanished. The shadows which had created it dispersed, and the entire area grew lighter. All which remained in front of them was the bottom half of Plemons' body, spilling the last of its blood into the dust. Bobby turned away, his stomach churning. He forced himself to calm down, swallowed what was trying to come up. Whatever food was in there, he needed to keep it. When he felt stable, he pointed a finger at Prudence. "I think we need to talk," he whispered. Bobby grabbed Marty's shoulder and pulled his friend along with him. Joseph's eyes were visibly wet as he gazed at what remained of the men in the dust. He wiped at his eyes. "Coming, Joseph?" Bobby asked.
"Yeah, yes. What choice do I have?"
"We're not heading back down into those tunnels," Marty stated.
No,
Prudence said calmly.
there's no need. I know you spoke to the old man. The old man is mad. Is ancient, you know, and hasn't had his faculties for many years. This is why we are in such terrible danger. Let's find a place to sit and discuss."
Bobby wasn't sure he could take much more, but the human brain has an ability to push aside even the greatest of horrors to continue functioning. This was the essence of war. How many European soldiers had seen horrors beyond what the Americans had seen? The world was a vast, giant machine, churning and spinning in an endless void. Man fought over pieces of this earth when the rest of the universe was so empty and black. It didn't make sense. Humans thought they could tame the machine, use it for their own purposes. It was laughable. Now Bobby knew the tales of the old had some ring of truth. There were demons. There were forces at work beyond earth, fire, water, and air. Monsters existed. Who would presume to be able to control such forces? Why even try? They walked down the street, coming into the old town square again. Prudence found a seat on a large piece of broken stone. She appeared tired now as Bobby stared at her face in greater detail. How old was she? She looked to be a young girl, perhaps in her late teens or early 20s, but she might have been 1,000 years old. There was an aura of age around her. Bobby took a seat opposite her, his bones tired from hours of fear and running around. Marty plopped down heavily beside him, his head down. Joseph took a spot to Prudence's right, also looking defeated. The rest of the men created a loose circle around them all. They were quiet, their thoughts turned inward. "So, what do you know?" Bobby asked. "What can you tell us?" Prudence sighed.
"I'm much older than I appear. I am not as old as the man you spoke to earlier, but I've been around a long time. Most of the people here have. You see, the old man is correct. There is magic in this ground. There are many places like this around the world. Places where odd things happen. Sometimes things disappear without explanation. Sometimes there are strange lights in the sky. Sometimes just strange sensations, ghosts, spirits, monsters. These are places where the walls between this reality and others are very thin. Things leak through, at times break through, walk around among us. For centuries, there were men who could summon and ask those things for favors, break into the other realities, control what they found. They were given many names, such as wizards or warlocks. But it was the natural order of things, to control these creatures and the realities. Things changed, though.
Bobby felt a strange sensation in his mind. Suddenly, his brain was filled with images of what she was saying. Images of old men in robes, carrying staffs like something out of a fairy tale book. Men who could reach into what appeared to be thin air and pull monsters from it. Men and women who could summon the energy between worlds to do magnificent things, or command weather, trees, plants, and animals.
The problem is men grew old and died off.
Prudence continued.
The rituals were handed down, mouth by mouth and word by word. Let us say, things got lost in those translations. The walls between realities hardened over time too. The words and abilities dimmed. The old man is many, many years old, but he doesn't have the true essence of the magic anymore. He's been disconnected. He wanted to protect us. His kind had done so before, many times. They summoned energies from multiple worlds to hide the village, move it. All of reality can be malleable if you know how to manipulate the energies. This time, though, the old man wanted to do something he felt would allow the village to stay where it was, but protect the people. The spells and rituals were old and incomplete, though. He reached into the darkest words and books to try and find the right solution. I told him not to.
Prudence shuddered. In his mind, Bobby saw all of this happen. The villagers, all of them from ancient clans going back centuries, standing fearful as the guns and soldiers got closer. They saw what the future beheld. Nightmares from the air, gas fired from guns, poisoning and killing those who ran, trenches featuring mud mixed with blood, the tons of earth thrown up by bigger and bigger shells. War had come time and again. Sometimes they knew in advance and had been able to hide. Other times they had to fight. This time, the elder wanted to do a little bit of both.
I told him the ritual was incomplete, and he was dealing with elements he could not possibly understand. These were primordial forces, the things which existed before man himself crawled out of ooze to become humans, before the worlds we know, sit upon and stare at in the sky. There was another universe. Creatures like the one you just saw lived there, but also far, far worse. Giant beasts which eventually warred, destroyed each other, or left themselves in a state of constant sleep. They were eventually banished to a deep, dark world hidden at the center of the multiverse. They sleep now, waiting to be summoned. The old man wished to summon at least one of them, perhaps one close to our universe. Risk tearing apart the entire multiverse to bring one of those old creatures here.
Bobby saw the ritual behind closed eyes within his mind. It took days. Animals were sacrificed and blood spread. The pages within the books were old, in languages even the old man no longer understood. Prudence begged him to stop. Meanwhile, outside, the bombs fell, the soldiers fired their guns, the machine guns tore people apart, the siege weapons pounded the earth again and again. The shells fell upon the village now. Soldiers were getting closer. The ritual was completed, but it seemed nothing happened. The village started to move underground.
The first group of soldiers to come were the French,
Prudence said.
They sent a large group here, hoping to get some sort of advantage around the German trenches. They wanted to build a base here, perhaps fortify the entire town. Those of us who had not yet gone underground watched as they came. The old man was there too. It wasn't long before the beast appeared.
Bobby saw this too. The columns of soldiers approaching as the sun went down, their guns over their shoulders, the sound of the feet like something alive, moving and twisting towards them. The villagers looked on with dread and fear mixed with resignation. Their rituals didn't work. Then, the beast appeared. The shadows formed into the giant maw, the red eyes. It attacked with a ferocity no one could have anticipated. Even the old man was shocked to see when it tore straight into the columns of men. They died by the scores, blood exploding into the air as if bombs dropped from the skies. The soldiers tried to fight, but it was hopeless. So those who had not been slaughtered in the first attack ran in the direction of the first place they saw. They ran towards the village.
We hid,
Prudence said.
We hid in the tunnels. Most of us, anyway. There were a few who stayed behind to watch the soldiers. They told us later how the soldiers had been cut down, but a few of them made it. We kept out of sight, most of us wondering why any of them had survived. Why? The beast was supposed to protect us. Why bring the soldiers in?
Prudence looked down at her hands, shifting a bit as she did so. The memories made her uncomfortable. Her eyes were distant, reflecting the dimming light.
Those first soldiers just spent one night here,
she continued.
The next day, they tried to leave. They were determined to fight whatever they ran into. The beast appeared again, but this time they got off a few shots. However, as you have seen, the beast appears as a dog, but it is not. It's shadow, darkness. They never stood a chance. They were cut down and tore apart, shredded into pieces of meat. We stood and watched as it devoured the last of them, coming back again and again until every last scrap of those soldiers was gone.
The images just kept coming in Bobby's head. When he opened his eyes, he saw the others were feeling the same thing. They had looks of terror on their faces, seeing the things Prudence had experienced. At some point, Bobby realized she was no longer speaking. The images came from her mind. Bobby closed his eyes again and could see the sun, feel the stones beneath his feet as if he were back there standing with the village. The villagers, with the building still standing, although they would fall soon, gathered to argue over what had happened. There was a terrific row between the old man, the elders among them, and the younger members. This was not what was supposed to happen. The elder gods were supposed to protect them. This thing appeared uncontrollable and had brought the soldiers into the village. It was at this time the old man came up with a story about the beast trying to bring soldiers into the village to force them to work together. The younger members didn't buy it. So far, just the French had come and they hadn't stayed. What was this? The other elders said the old man could see into the future and the younger were being rude. The argument grew until one of the younger members and one elder ended up in a physical fight. They were separated, told to cool down. The next morning, the younger villager who had started the fight gathered 15 others and stated they were leaving. They wanted nothing to do with elder gods, beasts, other worlds, or man's wars. They were going to find another place to live and start over. There was a larger argument, but the younger men won out. Prudence said goodbye to the man who was to be her husband, and she stood at the edge of the village as the younger men stepped out into the empty area just beyond. They looked back at the village, but they kept going. Bobby felt the horror in her heart when the shadows appeared. The men froze, unable to understand what was happening, until the first man, in the lead, was torn to pieces. The howl which came next caused most of them, including Prudence's betrothed, to run. They never got close. She looked into his eyes, his right hand extended towards her despite being at least 50 yards away, as the claws from the beast ripped through him from behind. She saw his spine come out his chest, and his eyes went dark. Blood erupted from his mouth in a fountain. Then his head was gone. Then he was torn in half. The villagers divided then. Half of them wanted to kill the old man. The old man tried to explain they were not allowed to leave the village for their own protection. The beast was doing what it had been summoned to do, protecting them from the war, protecting them from the world of men. Those who didn't want to hear it anymore moved underground first. Prudence and 10 others moved further down into the tunnels. The older tunnels. Up above, the rest of the village tried to make their lives as normal as possible, but the guns of men roared. The shells fell. The planes flew over the village, and more soldiers came only to be killed out in the field, and more of them sought refuge within the walls. Every time they would try to leave, and the beast would return to finish them off. Eventually, there was little left of the village, and the rest of its residents came down into the tunnels. They built their homes within the darkness, carved from stone walls, creating as much light as possible and trying to bring a normal life to their families.
Since then, we just wait to die.
Prudence spoke again.
I do know soldiers keep coming. They come and they die, but it does nothing to stop the war. It's as if the beast actually draws them here somehow. There have been others in the village who have tried to leave, but were also killed.
Prudence sighed, her head down. She wiped her eyes.
I think as you do, Bob.
She whispered, looking into his face.
I think the old man tried to use dark magic older than he was. He didn't know what he was doing, and something was summoned, but not what he originally intended to bring here. Something evil. Perhaps the ancient magic of this place prevents it from coming in, but I notice it is getting closer. It is the closest to the village it has ever been when I saw it just now. I think the village is dying, and soon it will be within the streets. It will come down into the tunnels and kill all of us.
She shuddered, her breath hitched in her chest, and shrugged.
Or we will just die from starvation or something else. We may live a long time, but death comes to all of us.
Bobby felt as if he had been drained of his life force entirely. He slumped as the hold over his mind and the images he had been seeing stopped. There was nothing, he thought. Nothing. What could he do? If the Hellhound outside was not of flesh and blood, what was there?
So, what do we do?
Joseph asked. His eyes were bright with tears from what he had seen. He chewed at his lower lip nervously.
What do you mean?
Prudence asked.
Well, we can't just sit here and not do anything,
Joseph said.
If that thing out there is getting closer, are we just going to wait for it? We have to get out of here. We have to get away from the villagers who want to believe in a crazy old man.
You saw what the hound did, Bobby retorted. What do you think we can do? It's not even flesh and blood. There's nothing to shoot. You can't set it on fire or blow it up.
What does it want?
Joseph asked.
I don't understand,
Prudence said, confusion on her face.
It was summoned here and is killing. The old man has twisted his brain into knots to convince himself and others it's killing to somehow bring about peace to the world. You think it's out there just to kill. Why? How much will it kill? Why is it killing? What is the purpose of its existence now it's here in our world?
Prudence thought about this for a moment.
I don't know. Maybe it has no purpose. Maybe in trying to bring back one of the elder gods, we brought back something of pure evil, which does nothing but survive on human flesh. You saw the faces in its hide, didn't you?
Bobby realized she had directed the question to him.
Yes. It must absorb them in some way.
Prudence continued.
Perhaps it's growing stronger. It seems so. It's gotten even bigger since we first saw it. Soon it will tower over the trees. But it makes no sense,
Joseph protested.
Even the elders, as you call them, would be afraid of such a thing.
What if it's a minion of one of these ancient ones you mentioned? Marty said, his eyes staring straight ahead at a point on the ground. What if the elder gods waged war too? You said they did, didn't you? The hound might be a weapon. Maybe it's part of why the elders had to be banished. Maybe even they had no control over the weapons they created. Things like the hound. The words hung in the air like fireflies. All of them imagined the giant beasts of the elder gods being torn apart by the beast they saw. If this were true, Bobby thought, then the hound must be infinitely bigger than what they saw. Something so big it would never stop.
What about the tunnels?
Joseph asked.
How far into the distance underground do they go? Can we get out of here by entering the tunnels and traveling away from this place? Where do they lead?
Prudence shook her head.
Not far enough. Could we extend them?
Joseph insisted.
We just need to get past this field, right? The beast did not attack us in the road. It didn't attack us 10 miles from here. It seems bound to this place.
Prudence thought about this for a moment.
Perhaps it could work. Many of the tunnels have collapsed over the years. It won't be easy. Plus, the old man and some other elder villagers will protest. However, are you prepared to dig tunnels? You're all weak and exhausted, battered by war.
Bobby felt a faint spark of hope. We can deal with the villagers. As for the rest, you find out quickly here men can do anything when it comes to survival.
We're discussing moving stones, large stones, without equipment to break them up. Are you all strong enough to move stones?
We damn well have to be, Marty replied. They walked down into the tunnels later that same night. Prudence led them to the area off to the left, away from the brightness of the main square. Once they arrived, they found it was equally bright in this part of the tunnels, but only after walking through much darkness, as if the darkness itself were a barrier to keep the others out. This part of the tunnel system was older. The stone and brick was run down and falling over in many areas. Moss grew on the stones, and water dripped from all corners. The men shed their coats and outer garments. They found another tunnel which had collapsed and determined it would be the best one to dig out and extend. All hoped maybe the tunnel went farther than it appeared. How long they worked the first night, Bobby did not know, since time in the tunnels no longer held any meaning. It felt good to have something to work on instead of thinking about mystics, magic, elder gods, and shadow beasts. It was always better to work than face death. At some point, they all reached the extent of their energies and collapsed in exhaustion. They smiled and felt good, though, having cleared away roughly 15 feet into the tunnel. The walls seemed sound, sturdy, but already scraps from the surface were used to shore up weak points.
We had never thought of trying.
Prudence whispered in the darkness as she and Bobby sat side by side, looking at the tunnel.
You live with a thing long enough, you soon can't see anything else but.
Bobby nodded in agreement. Are you gonna leave with us if this crazy scheme works?
Yes, I suppose I must. There's nothing for us here. Look at some of the villagers who came here and started to help. Not all of them were living in this part of the tunnels just this morning. People are tired of the lies and fear.
At least 10, maybe 15 villagers had come to help them dig out the tunnel. They also sat around, scattered about the area, murmuring. The looks of exhaustion and fear on their faces tugged at Bobby's heart. He wanted more than ever to get out of here and bring them with. Perhaps he could do just one good thing during this war by saving these people. They all rested for a few hours. Down in the darkness, it was impossible to know what time it was. Bobby checked his watch to find it had stopped. When he wound it, the device refused to tick again. Time was funny down here, he mused. The villagers themselves were ancient, or so Prudence told him, so time passed differently for them. Perhaps it was something within the air. They had summoned some ancient magic from the depths, filled the tunnels, and surrounded the village. He was tempted to ask Prudence how old she was, but it seemed indelicate. After a few hours where Bobby dozed off for a time, they got back to their feet and started digging again. The work was steady and went on for hours and hours. They used some of the stones to hold up what remained of the roof. Eventually, the tunnel began to emerge. The walls became clear, and they got past where things had fallen in. The new tunnel was not very stable, and this worried Bobby, but once they were past the blockage, they found themselves in a dark tube which seemed to extend far into the distance. How far do you think this goes? Marty asked as Bobby stood holding a torch, gazing into the new channel. No idea, Bobby replied. I can't see any further than you can. I hope far enough. You think this'll really work? Marty asked.
It has to.
Joseph chimed in, standing to Bobby's right.
But we should be the ones who head down there and see how far it goes. There may be another blockage just past where the light of this torch flickers.
Why us? Marty asked.
In case you haven't noticed, we've sort of become the leaders of this group,
Joseph said with a grin.
I never intended to be, but we are.
Here's another thing to worry about. What do we do when we get out of here? Bobby asked. We're supposed to be shooting at each other. Do we just go back to what we were doing before we ended up here? Joseph's face grew grim.
I do not plan to, my friend. I plan to get out of this country, to hide somewhere until this war is over. I also plan to get very drunk until I forget all about magic and old gods.
I knew war would be scary, Marty added. But I didn't think the nightmares I had as a kid would be real over here. It's madness. Everything here is madness. Well, how do we do this? Bobby asked. We should get a few supplies and head down, but we must head back at some point and let everyone know if it's clear. Feel up to going now? Marty asked. Doesn't seem to be much point in waiting, Bobby said. Truth be told, he was afraid. He was a bit claustrophobic, and being underground was not helping. Still, there was no other way.
Are you heading out now?
Prudence's voice echoed off the walls. Bobby faced her. We need to get some idea of how far this goes.
I should go with you,
she said. It's best to keep it small, he replied.
Why do you men feel the need to act so foolish? If this is our chance, perhaps we should all go.
None of you shall go.
The voice came from behind them. Not loud, but commanding nonetheless. Bobby turned and was not surprised to see Abraham and the old man.
Why do you come down here, old man?
Prudence asked.
What we do down here doesn't matter to you.
Don't be stupid, woman.
The old man spat.
If you try this, you will die. If you attempt this, you risk bringing the beast closer, perhaps even into the tunnels with us.
The beast is up there, Marty added, pointing to the ceiling despite the man's blindness. We're down here.
The creature up there is a scion of the other gods. Do you think it cares or knows the difference between up there and down here? It's made of shadow. Where are there more shadows than down here?
Don't try to stop us, old man,
Joseph said.
We're going to see if this tunnel will take us out of here.
Oh, the tunnel goes on far enough to take you miles away. However, the hound will not let you leave.
Then you admit what you told us before was nonsense, Bobby accused. You summoned a creature you cannot control, something which will make its way in here and kill everyone.
I make no claims, child.
The old man spoke defiantly.
It will leave when men surrender their guns. Once a man has submitted to the other gods, to the universe, and stopped its war, the beast will return from where it came.
Bobby, Marty, and Joseph looked at each other nervously. The old man had a way of speaking to the center of your brain. It was very convincing. He could feel his resistance waning. Are you going to stop us? Bobby asked.
If I must.
Abraham produced a gun from his waistband and held it pointed at the soldiers. Bobby recognized it as one of his soldiers' sidearms. The old man also had a gun. Despite his clouded eyes, he had the barrel pointed directly at Bobby's forehead. This is crazy, Bobby said, his voice calm but his heart hammering. He crawled his right hand toward the holster on his hip. We need not shoot. We can't become the thing we hate up above. Think about what you're doing, old man, Marty said. You said we had to put the guns down. We had to turn away from violence. None of us have guns on us. Which is it? The old man's face twisted in pain.
It's beyond my control. Don't you see? I have to protect my people, and if that means I have to turn to violence to do it, then sacrifice myself, so be it.
Let us go, Bobby said. Let us take the tunnel as far as we can. It may be blocked just a few feet beyond where our torches can shine. The bombing here has been intense. If it's blocked, there's not much we can do. We won't have the numbers or the strength to move every blockade, but if it's open, we can all get out of here. We can leave the beast. Let the soldiers come and feed it, but perhaps the soldiers will not come. Perhaps they will abandon this place and the beast will just die of starvation, or at least go back to where it came from.
You tampered with something you didn't understand,
Joseph accused.
Now your people are paying for it. The above world is already filled with horror and death. All you did was summon more horror and death. You opened a door through with something no one on this planet has had to deal with before. How can you know what it will do? It will not protect. It will feed and feed until it has eaten its fill. You know this. We need to leave. This village needs to be abandoned.
This is my home,
the old man said, his blank eyes filled with tears.
You ask me to abandon the place I have lived my entire life. If you had any idea how long this life is, you would not ask me. I will stay behind. Abram, get as many of the others as you can. I will go with these men for a ways. Perhaps I can protect them or offer assistance with the beast, or anything else which might be hiding under the ground. I will then stay behind here, and the village can leave. Perhaps sacrificing myself to the hound will stop it.
Abraham looked stricken. Don't ask me for such things,
Hush now, son.
the old man replied.
I need you to lead these people to someplace else. Someplace far from the wars and the evils of the world. If you can, forget the magic of our people too. I see now how it can bring such a horrible evil.
Abraham wanted to protest. One look at his face showed how much he did not want this to happen. He looked down at his gun, then put it into his waistband. He helped the old man down the small embankment until he could join the soldiers.
Will you be able to walk?
Abraham asked.
I'll be fine.
The old man replied.
Gentlemen, let's go a ways down. We'll see if this tunnel is open. If it appears it is, I give permission to get as many out as you can. I'll do my best to keep the others at bay.
Bobby didn't trust the old man, and he didn't trust Abraham at his back with a gun, but it seemed futile to keep arguing. Instead, he nodded agreement to a man who appeared blind and held a torch above his head. Ready? He asked Marty and Joseph. Both indicated they were and held their own torches aloft. With the old man beside him, Bobby took point and they stepped into the tunnel. The darkness beyond just a few feet seemed absolute. Despite the torches and flickering flames, there were shadows all around. It was as if the darkness were devouring the light and the light somehow sustaining it. Every few seconds, Bobby felt his heart jump to double speed when he thought he saw something move out of the corner of his eye. Every time he'd move his torch and turn to see, only to find nothing. The walls seemed further away than they had been in the other tunnels. When the walls could be seen, the brick was covered in wetness and some kind of slick slime which shone the light back at them. Water ran down the middle of the walkway where they strode in a small channel like a tiny river or stream. The old man did not hesitate once. He appeared not to notice the darkness. Bobby figured he could probably see as well as if it were daylight. Never once did he stumble or have to search for the right path. Because of his sure-footedness, the old man was soon in the lead with Bobby behind him, then Joseph and Marty in the rear.
I think we're right at the edge of the village,
the old man whispered.
Beyond this, and we'll be past the border. I can smell the blood the beast has soaked into the ground above.
This brought no comfort to them. They could not smell blood. Bobby smelled body odor and fear. None of them had bathed in days. If the beast was truly like a dog, then all of them would smell for miles. As if doing so might stave off an attack, they moved slower and more carefully. Bobby looked down at his feet, trying to avoid kicking any loose stones or stepping loudly into a puddle. The shadows grew darker, more oppressive. It seemed they were lost in a vast sea of darkness, perhaps in the deepest regions of outer space. Their torches showed no walls, did not indicate a beginning or end to the tunnel. I don't know about you guys, but I think something's happening here, Marty whispered. You see something? Bobby asked. Not sure. I keep looking back. There's a few pinpricks a lot from where we came. It looks like something keeps walking between us and the line. It's probably just a trick of the light, Bobby assured. He didn't want to turn around and look. He felt the hairs up and down his back stand at attention, like electricity running through his body. Just keep an eye on it. I think I see it too, Joseph added.
I turned around and saw the flickering lights, and suddenly they were gone for a moment. Maybe it's one of the villagers following us. Bobby hoped. Maybe Abraham decided to follow us after all.
He might do such a thing,
The old man said.
He has always been willful and doesn't like to listen. However, I fear this may be something else. I can sense something around us. Something evil.
Bobby walked faster. Let's see what we can find down the tunnel. None of it will matter if the hound gets down here, Marty said, his voice rising in fear. We need to turn back. Bobby felt a sudden determination. No, we have to get out of here. We have to find out what's up ahead. If it's behind us, we're screwed anyway.
Maybe if we show we're going back, it won't kill us,
Joseph said. You saw those men up there try to run back. Bobby countered. It won't forgive us. We have to try, Marty said. Marty's hand fell on his shoulder with an iron grip. Bobby stopped. Bobby, stop it, Marty said. You won't be able to save Prudence or any of the other villagers if the hound is here. We need to turn back. Bobby turned around to see what everyone was looking at. He saw just darkness, but far in the distance, like staring at a distant star flickering in the substance of space. The light flashed and grew dimmer, but remained constant. It felt as if he stared for hours and was about to tell them they were all crazy and paranoid when something moved across the lights. One moment he could see the flames in the distance, then they were gone. They remained gone for several seconds before returning. Whatever it is closer, too.
Agreed,
Joseph replied.
Something is happening. I can feel it. The surrounding shadows are moving.
Bobby felt pure, raw panic rise in his chest. What had he done? How would they get out of this? Trying to run on the uneven ground with chunks of brick from the crumbling tunnel walls was guaranteed to break an ankle. There was no way to run. He swiveled his head, moving the torch as he did so. Bobby still couldn't see the surrounding walls, but he saw what the old man was talking about. The shadows undulated in a way which had nothing to do with the torch flames. It was similar to what they had seen up above when the hound appeared. The shadows were alive, crawling like fingers up and down, pulling together. It was as if something alive and very dark massaged the walls, caressed the light. Bobby, Marty whispered. And the single word was a plea for him to do something. Command them. Decide. No. Bobby hissed under his breath. It was the only word his mind would accept. No.
What do we do?
Joseph asked. Bobby sensed the panic rising in his voice, too.
I'll stop it.
The old man stepped forward in front of the men. Around them, the darkness swarmed and gathered. The teeth formed, and around the red eyes, a head. Bobby could see it now despite the darkness. It really did look like a giant hound, pointed ears and snarling mouth with sharp white teeth. A low growl filled the tunnel with vibrations Bobby felt in his chest. The old man was speaking, but it was a language none of them had heard before. He gestured with both hands, the fingers entwining, crossing over one another. He waved his arms, sketching symbols in the air. The hound formed 15 feet from them. The light in the distance was blocked, and Bobby's torch flickered as if there were a great wind pounding down the chamber of the tunnel. Wait, Bobby said. He had the smallest germ of an idea, but it was incomplete. He just knew what the old man was doing would get him and the rest of them killed. The growling grew more intense. The old man sketched more symbols in the air, then spat on the ground. With a swift move belying his age, he ripped open his shirt. Bobby couldn't see from the angle he stood, but his bet was the man's chest was covered in more symbols and runes. We have to stop him,
Marty said, and he took several steps towards the old man. The hound let out a bark. The sound was like a thunderclap, and the sound wave hit Bobby hard in the chest like a baseball bat. Joseph collapsed to his knees. Marty nearly fell, catching himself at the last minute. Bobby also managed not to fall, but for several seconds he could hear nothing but ringing in his ears. His eyes watered. The hound's mouth opened, and he saw saliva drip from the teeth. The old man walked to within just a few feet of the hound. Now his arm movements were even more intense, almost hard to follow with the naked eye, blurs of motion. He had not slowed even when the sound hit him. Energy crackled from the darkness, and when the old man raised his right fist, something like lightning flew to his hand. The energy snaked and caressed his skin. He held this fist of energy aloft and spoke 2 more sentences to the beast. Then, silence. The beast lowered its head, and to Bobby's surprise, sniffed the air into the old man's chest. The old man, to his credit, did not move. Energy, held within his closed fist, barely contained. Seconds ticked on as they stood a few feet, then mere inches apart. Bobby's hearing began to return. The hound snarled suddenly, and the low vibration growl returned. The old man hurled curses at the beast, and he reared his arm back like he was about to throw a baseball. The energy grew brighter, from the whites and blues of lightning to pure white. The hound moved first, and moved like shadows. The teeth, red eyes, and formations of its body grew blurry for a fraction of a second. These shadows surrounded the old man in the blink of an eye, then returned to its position in front of him. It all happened so fast, it took all of those staring in disbelief a moment to realize what had happened. The old man opened his mouth in a mixture of shock, pain, and horror. He looked up at his arm with his whitened eyes. Above him was no longer a fist of energy, but a ragged stump, which dripped blood down his arm and spattered his face. The hound chewed. There was the sickening sound of bones crunching in its mouth. The energy gathered within the fist crackled and spat around its muzzle. It appeared completely unfazed by any of it. "We have to run," Bobby said. "We have to run now." Marty couldn't move. Instead, he opened his mouth and screamed. Bobby pushed him hard in the back, and he staggered forward before breaking into a run. Bobby looked back and saw Joseph was already in a full sprint. The old man screamed. His voice was like gravel, the sound of his pain so rough and miserable. Whatever bravado he might have had when he stepped up to his creation was gone. He tried to speak more of his magical words, but the hound swiped at the man's face with one giant paw. There was the loud sound of flesh tearing and bones breaking. Bobby saw this out of the corner of his eye as they ran past. One moment the man was speaking, then the shadowy hound's front paw moved and there was a spray of blood. The man's lower jaw, tongue, and teeth were gone, his throat ripped open. Blood sprayed the hound, but to Bobby's horror, the shadow creature absorbed it all. He saw the faces again within the dark fur of the creature, this time all concentrating on the blood spattering across its body. The open mouths of the men the beast had killed drank hungrily, absorbing the old man's essence. From that moment on, Bobby could not see what was happening. He didn't want to. They had run past the man and the hound. He could still hear, though. He heard the old man gurgling, still trying to breathe. It was wet and sickening, with a loud whooping sound as his lungs breathed through the hole in his neck. Then the growl returned, and there was the sound of more tearing flesh mixed with crunching bones. The wheezing stopped. They hadn't gotten far. The flickering lights in the distance still looked too much like distant stars in the night sky. The beast was finished with its meal quickly, and the surrounding shadows formed once again in front of the fleeing men. The hound filled the tunnel. It was massive, and the teeth gleamed with saliva and blood. Its eyes burned with red hate and anger, the growling shaking Bobby's bones, rattling the ancient stones around them and sending fine dust down onto their heads. Bobby froze. All of his limbs ceased to listen to his brain's commands. He could do nothing but stare at the hound. He could see nothing but the hound. Marty had the opposite reaction. He screamed something Bobby couldn't quite understand, but it was some form of denial. Perhaps of the hound's existence, perhaps of the impending doom which sat before them, perhaps of the circumstances which had led him to this point. Marty dodged to his left and tried to run past the beast. Bobby could see his friend's face, set as if carved in stone. The look was pure determination. The hound barely moved its eyes. Marty was parallel with it for a moment. Then the shadow shifted, and Marty flew through the air, his face a tattered mess. Bobby's friend flew past him and crumpled to the ground 5 feet to Bobby's right. No! There was nothing Bobby could do. He forgot about the hound or where he was. He ran to the man who had become his only friend in this world of nightmares. Marty was the first person he met when he arrived in France. He had an easy smile and casual way about him. He charmed everyone he met, and the company loved him. Marty made friends easily, but he and Bobby held some strange bond. They couldn't have been more different, but they latched on to each other. They had gone over the top together, had trudged through the mud and blood together, fired their rifles, attacked German trenches with bayonets together. They had huddled in trenches while the shelling went on and on above them together. Bobby ran to his friend. He knew the hound watched him as he did. He knew his running might trigger the beast and that at any moment the creature might attack. Bobby heard Joseph say something in German, perhaps a curse, perhaps a prayer. Bobby knelt down to Marty's crumpled form. The way his friend lay on the ground, he knew he was likely gone. There were just limbs and clothing. Legs and arms splayed and twisted over each other to the point where it was hard to discern one from the other. Bobby grabbed his friend and rolled him onto his back. Marty's right arm was barely attached to his shoulder. It had torn the right side of his face. Bobby could see Marty's teeth and jaw on the right side. "Marty!" Bobby called out. "Jesus, Marty!" To his shock, Marty's eyes opened and his eyeballs rolled in their sockets for a moment. Then they locked onto Bobby's, and he stared at his friend. "I'm sorry," Marty said. It was hard to understand him. His jaw had been shattered. His tongue flapped against his teeth. Blood ran down into the muck covering the ground. It soaked his clothes. "I can feel it," Marty said, although it was very hard to understand him. Bobby leaned down to hear more clearly. "It's absorbing me, sucking me up. It wants all of us, all of us." "Hang on, Marty," Bobby said. He knew it was impossible. The blood pouring out of Marty's face and the damage done was too much. "Please, stop fighting," Marty said, his eyes unfocused. Bobby could see the muscles in his face, now exposed, working to try forming words. "Stop fighting. It feeds on war." "It feeds on war?" Bobby repeated. "What do you mean? Please, Marty, don't go. Don't go, please." Marty was already going. His eyes rolled up into his head. Bobby could see the whites of his eyes while his jaw and tongue kept trying to form words. He held his friend close to his chest, and Marty's hand, covered in gore, reached out to clutch at his chest. Bobby felt his friend's fingers tense and dig into the fabric of his shirt. Marty's entire body stiffened in pain, then relaxed. The rattle of his last breath washed over Bobby, and then Marty was gone. Bobby held his friend and pulled his head closer to him. He rocked the body, uncaring about the mythical beast standing over him. He could feel the air as the hound moved, perhaps breathed. At this point, he didn't care anymore. Nothing mattered. The war didn't matter. Living, dying, didn't matter. What was war? War was people in the government deciding they wanted more. They wanted more land, more territory. For what purpose? The earth itself was a tiny ball of dirt floating in an endless void. Bobby didn't believe there was anything out in the void of space. There were stars and planets, perhaps with life, but Bobby doubted it. Were he God, he would have stopped with humans. Humans must have been the most disappointing of his creations. Built in God's own image, and all they did was fight or kill. Did this mean God was death? Bobby hated God. He hated humans. He hated the governments of the world who manufactured the need for wars. These same people, all of whom sat hundreds of miles away in cushy offices and never once saw a trench or a bullet, sent thousands, perhaps millions of young men to war. To fight the fights they were too cowardly to fight on their own. What was the point of this war? Someone had assassinated a man thousands of miles away from Bobby's home. What did this have to do with his life there? Why did it matter at all? The entire world mobilized to create new ways of killing. It was just a few decades after the country Bobby called home had torn itself apart in its own civil war. He was done. He was done with it all. No more. There was nothing which could convince him any of this was worthwhile. At that moment, Bobby felt his mind expand and could see the future. This war to end all wars was anything but. There would always be more. Men had created guns which could fire more bullets faster. They built airplanes only to turn them into weapons. Humans had started this war because countries wanted to build bigger and bigger battleships. This would continue with bigger ships, bigger bombs, bigger airplanes. Man would build bigger submarines, bigger guns. Eventually, entire cities would be destroyed. When would it be enough? The entire planet? It was enough. It had to be enough. One person had to stand up and say no. Just one person who could say no, and then it might cascade. It's unlikely, but the wars had to stop. There had to be a way to stop it. Humans had infected the world with the desire for war. Humans had been born in blood and continued to bathe in it. Bobby kissed Marty's forehead. Slowly, gently, he set his friend's body on the ground. He didn't want to leave his friend within the mud and muck down here. This was no place for his friend. No place for any human being to be left behind. Neither was no man's land. "Stop it," Bobby said. He felt the beast move. Joseph stood behind him too, just watching, frozen in horror. The shadows shifted and moved in a wave. He felt the presence of the beast over him, towering over him, filling the tunnel. Bobby felt tears course down his face. At one time, this would have embarrassed him, but not anymore. He tilted his head back and looked into the hound's face. There it was, just shifting shadows with parts both solid and unsolid. A creature which should not have existed, but here it was, summoned by a crazy old man who also wanted to stop war, but tapped into an ancient essence of madness and horror. Perhaps this was the hidden thing which had poisoned the world, turning it into what it was now. The universe, born from chaos, created by beasts like this. Ancient evils which slumbered, but their poisonous blood leaked through, contaminating this reality too. Man murdering man, even on massive scales, perhaps controlled by ancient evils they no longer believed in. Bobby got to his feet and spread his arms out wide. Then he tore open his jacket and shirt. "I have no weapon," he said, looking down at Marty's body. "He was my friend, you son of a bitch. The only friend I had over here in the chaos I think you helped create. I didn't create this mess." Bobby waved his arms around to indicate he meant the world, the war, the way humans were. I never wanted to hurt anything, ever, he said to the beast. I never hunted an animal, never deliberately harmed anyone. I just wanted to work on a farm, wanted to till the soil and grow things. I was sent here. They taught me how to kill, and I did so to survive. The beast growled, the teeth showing. Bobby saw Marty's face appear within the chest of the creature. There for a moment, then gone, like something deep within a pond. Let us live, Bobby said. Let those within the village out of here. We'll go away and not fight. They summoned you to protect them, and now they're afraid. If you want to make a difference, you need to go to the front. See what the humans are doing there. You want souls? You want to feed off fear and war? There's the place you need to go. You can see into my mind. I can feel it. Just look and see what the front is. Then drain it. Drain all of it. Maybe if you have any capacity other than evil, you might be able to stop this. The beast cocked its head to the side, like a dog listening to its master's voice. Slowly, its massive head leaned down as Bobby closed his eyes. He waited for the pain of the bite. If he were lucky, perhaps it would bite his head clean off and there would be little to no pain. Get it over quick, he thought to himself. Instead of growling or the sensation of a bite, Bobby heard the hound sniffing at him. He felt the cold, wet nose against his left cheek, then down his neck. The sniffing continued down his body. How long this went on, Bobby did not know. His body shook in fear, waiting. The hound pulled back and growled. Bobby opened one eye and saw the beast sniff the air over its head. Then the massive head turned back towards Bobby. It was asking him a question. Bobby knew this suddenly as well as he knew he stood in the mud and muck. He knew it as well as he knew Marty, his friend, lay dead. Bobby got down on his knees, then lowered his head and arms to the floor of the tunnel. Prostrate now, he spoke to the beast. Do what you will to me, he said. I sacrifice myself for the rest of the village, for Joseph and the Germans. Just let them leave. Then go. Go to where you're needed. Go to the front and stop the war if you can. Stop people from killing each other, 'cause I'm done with it. I'd rather die here in a tunnel than go back to the hell of the front. Just do it quickly. How long did he lay there in the muck? The wetness of the floor seeped into the knees of his trousers. He felt the mud sticking to his face. He smelled ancient things rotting down here in the water, which seeped from the walls and probably from the primal parts of the earth itself. When a hand fell on his back, he nearly screamed. It was the last sensation he thought he'd feel. Get up, my friend, Joseph whispered to him. Bobby raised his head. The beast was gone. He turned his eyes up and saw Joseph there with a look of pure shock and some mix of happiness. What happened? Bobby asked, unsure if he was really still alive. He looked down at his muddy clothes. Where'd it go? It just vanished, Joseph replied. It was there, right over you, then sniffing at you, and then it was gone. The shadows just evaporated. Why did it go? Bobby mused more to himself than seeking an answer. I can only guess. Perhaps it was seeing you feel compassion for your friend. Perhaps it was you were the one person who did not try to fight it. You showed it what you really were. I don't know. Bobby nodded slowly. Maybe just one person showing they didn't want to fight was enough. Even the old man wanted to really use the beast as a weapon. Do you think it has left the village? Joseph asked. Can we get out of here? Not sure, but I think so. Bobby had another thought. I fear I may have just redirected it somewhere else. God help him. Joseph looked puzzled, but perhaps had had enough of mysteries and magic. They walked back the way they had come. The next morning, the villagers, along with the remaining soldiers, stood at the edge of the village. The world was brighter than it had been. No fog and no funny feeling of time stretching or bending. The surrounding shadows did not seem alive, and there was no sensation of being watched. Bobby and the other soldiers had discarded their guns and uniforms. All of them wore the same style of dress and clothing as the villagers. Fabrics Bobby had never seen before, which were both light and warm. He held Prudence's hand.
I think it's gone,
she said. I do too. Are you willing to try? She didn't hesitate. They walked hand in hand out into the barren area surrounding the village. They made it all the way across to the pitted road so many soldiers had trod before. There would be more, too. They all knew it. However, the future soldiers would find an empty town which had completely fallen apart. Whatever had been here would travel with them.
Looks like it's gone,
Bobby said. Where should we go?
If you and your fellow soldiers get caught, you'll be shot,
she declared.
But there are others like us, others who follow some of the old ways. They'll be happy to welcome us and guide you. You'll learn our ways too, become one of us.
It sounded like a fine life for Bobby. He could learn a new language and perhaps start farming like he had always hoped. Maybe he could find a spot to grow grapes. Making wine seemed like a fantastic way to spend the rest of his life. Let's get the rest and get going, he said, then kissed her on the lips. I can't wait to start a new life. How about you? Prudence admitted she felt the same. The soldiers huddled against the night. The weather, they said, was to turn colder tomorrow. It would bring rain, turning the trenches into mud holes and rivers of mud. It would make crossing no man's land nearly impossible as men and machines stuck fast within the thick soup the ground became. So at dawn, before the cold, they were to go over the top and charge the French across the way. The generals gave speeches about doing this for the good of Germany. They told them this would bring glory and victory to their homeland. Most of the men had seen countless charges, all of which led to nothing. No ground gained, just trenches. More mud, more dead. They huddled together, dreading the cold, wet weather as much as the machine gun fire. Wetness brought its own risks: trench foot, rot. Carl was in his 20s, but already an old man in his mind. He had days' worth of growth on his face. His hair, hands, and clothes were caked with mud. He held his head down, trying to will himself to sleep. If this were to be his last chance at sleep, he wanted it to count. It was deep into the night, when all was most quiet, that Carl heard the odd noise above him. A strange sound like the air rushing during a storm. An unusual sensation in his chest followed this. It was the same feeling he got watching shells going off from a distance. Sometimes you felt the rumble through the ground and into your bones before you heard it. Was it growling? Carl opened his eyes and saw his companions also huddled. Heinrich snored as he always did, his head tilted back and mouth open to the night air. Many others shifted in their positions. Remain still. Rest in whatever way you can. All of them in a row between narrow mud walls reinforced by rotting wood. None of them had made the sound. Something dripped onto Carl's left hand. It burned. He gasped, and this time looked up. He saw red eyes. He saw teeth. Carl had enough time to register the fact the world had more horrors than just war. He opened his mouth and barely let out a scream. Carl was lucky. He died first, and fast. The next morning, the French waited anxiously in their trench. Word was the Germans would charge at dawn. Across the field of craters and mud, A low-hanging dog clung to the earth. The machine gunners checked their weapons. The rest of them put on their helmets, fixed bayonets, waited. Dawn came and went. It baffled the generals. The intel was good. Why had they not charged? Eventually, a small division was sent across. Rare for daytime, but already clouds rolled in as a cold front pushed through. They crept to the German lines, waiting, sure this was some kind of trap, an ambush. When they peered into the trench, they were indeed surprised. All that remained were pieces of men, torn to shreds, faces fixed in horror.
"What do we do about this?"
asked one young soldier to one much older.
"We report it,"
was the reply.
"We report that and pray to God this madness eventually ends. Then pray whatever took them doesn't decide to visit our trench tonight."
The clouds rolled in, and the rain started, as if trying to wash away the sins of man, as if trying to wipe away the blood, as if trying to make the world clean once again. There are always things to fear worse than the horrors we inflict upon each other. War is madness. Murder is madness. Nature sees it, and sees what we do to each other, and cannot imagine what we will do to it in return. Sometimes, in the right circumstances, nature fights back. This is especially true when the sun vanishes, and when the night comes out. You've been listening to When the Night Comes Out, a weekly horror anthology podcast with stories by Bryan W. Alaspa and narrated by Allie James. Music by Kevin MacLeod and Vivek Abhishek. For Bryan's work, visit his website at bryanwalaspa.com or visit amazon.com for his books of fiction and nonfiction. Be sure to listen to Allie's work on Facebook at Allie James Projects. Visit our website at whenthenightcomesout.com to learn how to support us on Patreon.